The earth was lit by bright moonlight. The knights gathered in a clearing among the forest, and one of them showed his hand towards the same knight. He stood at a distance. On him was a red cloak, and he held a bloodied sword in his hands. It was a girl knight. She saw her pursuers, heard their voices, but still turned to see. On her tired face were drops of blood. She heard someone screaming, finding her. She heard the order to grab her, and this made her clasp her teeth and fight on. The knights rushed to her, but she made a jump to repel with her sword for another attack. She was not easy. Her lunges found some knights in briefly, and they paid their lives. After such a swift jump, she again stood on the ground. Her green eyes sparkled like lightning, but she was scared. She repulsed the next attack again and bent to the ground, but there were more knights and they continued to attack from all sides. She didn't want to die. With all her strength, as she could repel attacks and tried to attack herself. Despite the fact that the knight has been on the battlefield for more than 20 years, he was only a miserable pawn which could be thrown away at any moment. At some point she missed a blow, and someone's sharp sword amazed her. She fell to the ground, and the sword immediately stuck into the ground near her face. Nevertheless, the warrior did not feel pity for his own life, because it was a manifestation of chivalry. 2 knights fell on her, not allowing her to stand up. They grabbed her hands, trying to immobilize as much as possible, and he was already approaching them, asking that for 5 years now, right? A contented smile played on his face. His hair reflected the silver light of the moon, and he said that they were facing the battlefield like this. And he already got it all. The young man approached a fairly close distance and stood crossing his arms over his chest. He had long silver hair and bright blue eyes. He still smiled. Finally, he will see her face. He ordered to take off her helmet. The order was strictly executed. The knight sitting on her immediately pulled a helmet from her head. A red hair poured from under it. Surprise froze in the eyes of a young man rising above her. Apparently, he saw what he did not expect to see at all. Girl! In front of him was a girl with long red hair and sensual lips. Her face was stained in blood. He exclaimed that this was impossible. She looked at him with contempt, and he continued that the crazy dog, because of which all this time went about his ugly rumors, is a girl. He was shocked. She tried to break out, but she was held tightly, and he approached a step and said that Agricephana had lost the war. He also said that her death would complete all this battle. He took her by his chin and raised her face to him. His touches were gentle. He still said in surprise that she was a girl. He also crouched to be at the same level with her so that she saw his grin. He continued to touch her chin, saying that she was also with red hair. He paused, and then admitted that it was a pity to just kill. But she, with rage in her voice, asked that he was crazy? The guy covered his face with his palm and coughed. And then a demonic expression appeared on his face. His pupils narrowed, and a demonic shine appeared in his eyes. His face was distorted by rage. He clasped his teeth and growled that, of course. How can you fight with her for 5 years in a row and stay in common sense? He said that he would give her a choice. The girl was on the knees of the knights, held her hands. He asked her who wants to stay in everyone's memory, girl or knight. She did not want to listen to him. Long speeches. In her head there was only one thought. What a shitty day. And he continued to talk about the fact that after that, during this time, he managed to attach himself to her. So he will do the way she wants. She boldly answered him that apparently he was not yet in the know. Then she will tell him. He was surprised and incomprehensibly asked what. She said that she was a girl but still remained a knight. And yes, she is a knight but still remains a girl. She measured him with a piercing gaze of her green eyes, and said that therefore for her there was no reason to consider these two concepts not comparable. He was surprised and at the same time conquered her answer. He said, "What does it mean what her name asked?" The girl replied that her name was Diana Resley, and asked what was his name? He replied that his name is Cornelius Hayman. They were as calm as if they had a secular conversation. I didn't want to. But he still had to kill her, and he asked how her last words would be. The girl grinned wryly and said that he would kill her with one blow, admitting that she could not stand pain. He closed his eyes as if struggling with himself, looking for a different path, resigned to inevitability. And then he raised his hand in the fact that everyone would prepare for the treasury. She closed her eyes. No, she did not pray. At that moment, when the executioner made her sword, she made a promise. What in another life? She will never pick up a sword. A moment, she opened her eyes wide. There was a fright in them, and something else childish. She was lying in a big bed and was a little girl. Her fiery red hair was scattered over the pillow, and she seemed not to understand what happened. The girl sat down and rubbed her eyes, thinking about what it was. From somewhere from the side, she heard a voice who asked that she had already woken up. She looked to the side of where the voice came from and saw a young maid, which carried a stack of linen. The girl said that now she would bring her water for washing and asked to wait a bit. Diana was surprised to look at the servant. She recognized her. It was Olga. But she was so young that she involuntarily thought that she had not seen Olga so young for a long time. By the way, she was in her room in the estate of Resley. Diana, with nostalgia, thought that how long she had not been here almost began to forget. She suddenly felt sad, and tears came to her eyes from the fact that she thought that it could be a dream. Diana again lay on the pillow. The maid, noticing her condition, threw up her hands and asked that the lady is in order. Or maybe she got sick. But the girl replied that everything was in order, and trying to cope with her emotions, she said that Olga could go. The girl said that she wanted to enjoy this rest a little. Her words were seriously alarmed by the maid, and she thought that the little lady was definitely ill. She said that she would lead the doctor and ran to fulfill this promise, asking for Diana to wait a bit. And the girl, closing her eyes, lay and thought that how long she had not felt this peace and idle. It was nice, the idea that she wants such a happy dream to not end the last. Then she jumped up and thought that he was too realistic to be the fruit of her imagination. She went to the mirror and looked at herself, touched her reflection. Diana pinched her cheek and thought that this was clearly not a dream. She doubtfully thought she was returning to the past. The girl still stood in front of the mirror and thought, she is no more than 10 years old. True, there was one, but because of which she was not sure that she returned to the past. The girl held out her hand, and at that moment a greenish clot of energy appeared in her palm. She realized that the force she possessed remained with her. She was disturbed by the question, can she defeat him this time? A call was heard from behind the door. It was a servant. When the footman entered the room, he said that the master was calling her. Diana remembered her father. The girl thought. She remembered that those events were about this time. Father said that she was already 10 years old, and it's time to learn something to be able to feed yourself. He asked her if she wants to learn the art of a sword, or wants to listen to the lessons for the lady just like her sister. Diana was silent. It was a difficult choice. She forgot about the past until the footman turned to her. Diana answered him that you could go. She was fulfilled with determination. And it walked so fast that he barely kept up with her. And at that time, she thought that then she chose a sword. And that very future awaited her, war and destruction, but she will never pick up a sword again. She was again in her father's office. And again I heard the phrase that she was already 10 years old. He repeated everything exactly like last time. Diana thought to herself that he was saying exactly as she remembered. The girl wondered why she remembered this so well. She thought that it turned out then the Viscount was still quite young. Besides, her thoughts broke off. He said that it would be good if she learns to own a sword and lasts the benefit of the family. Viscount looked at his daughter. His gaze was strict, without a note of love or warmth. Diana thought that she had been afraid of his gaze before. And now she was never afraid of him. On the contrary, he caused her sympathy. She carefully examined him, his thin hands that never held a sword in his hands. A thin body. The pause was drawn, but she did not answer. He looked at her inquiringly. Diana did not understand why she was afraid of him before. On the contrary, now she got the impression that if she pushes it a little, he will fall right away. He coughed and made a choice for her, saying that she would better learn to own a sword, and he wanted to continue, but she interrupted him firmly, saying that she wanted to get etiquette to become a lady. He was completely surprised by her answer, but Diana stood her own. She argued her decision by the fact that she was unlikely to be useful, becoming a knight. She is physically weaker than her sister Regina, and so she wants to receive etiquette lessons to become a lady. The girl said that since he had heard her answer, she would go to her. She turned and went to the door. The remnants of the tension released her. Viscount was left alone in the office. For some time he stood looking at the door closed behind her. Diana walked along the corridor, and with every step her confidence in the decision of G in the decision. The path of becoming a knight was heavy. She plowed like a horse, practicing endless techniques on frantically. I trained at the site all day, so at the end of the training it was impossible to move with my hands. It seemed that there would be no end to endless training. If you miss at least one day, it was hard to keep up with others for the next. She shook her head, driving away heavy memories, and forbade herself to think about it. It was necessary to get together with thoughts. From now on, she is not a knight, but a lady. Dark clouds appeared in the sky, and in the near future there was a downpour. The girl stood outside the window and watched in large drops. She was upset that it started to rain on such a day. Her sister Regina, talking with her, noticed that everyone was saying that she was sick, but immediately added that Diana looks completely healthy. Regina Resley was the eldest sister of Diana. She asked what I heard Diana decided to take etiquette lessons. The girl carefully said that it would be better if she had become a knight. Diana asked, upset, why this is. And the sister answered her that because how could a girl with dirty blood become a noble lady? Diana frowned and thought about what kind of nonsense is Regina for nonsense. Her mother was Princess Agrissiphone, although she was not the queen's daughter, but the concubine's. Diana got angry and asked if Regina knew who her grandfather was, but her sister crossed her arms crossed arrogantly, replied that she knew. And she replied that he was the late king. She blinked her eyes and asked boldly, so what from this? And then Evil said that the royal family was abandoned from her mother. Diana looked incomprehensibly at her half-sister. She thought that why she did not like Regina. Regina was born from the last marriage of Viscount with the deceased wife, and Diana was born after a forced re-marriage. Viscount openly showed the difference in relation to them. While Diana was bathed in the blood on the battlefield, the pain and other hardships endured cold. Regina lived in comfort and cleanliness, eating exquisite dishes without denying anything. While Diana was on the verge of life and death, Regina lived a luxurious life, putting on various jewelry. The girl quietly said that she wanted to ask Regina a question. Does she really think that the royal family abandoned her mother? Diana never envied her sister's position, because she earned the authority of the family and those treasures at the cost of her life. Regina annoyed her. Diana said that if her mother was abandoned, then we can assume that this is a vitality of a garbage. Regina exclaimed that how can she say that? Then Diana asked that she knows what a marriage is according to the calculation. The girl explained to Regina that when a figure appears that they move as they want, she is called a marriage by calculation. And Snorting added that she would not hurt to learn. Regina was offended by her words, and she screamed so that Diana no longer called her sister, but the girl replied that she would not. This was even more angry with the older sister. She turned and went away from the room. Diana was left alone. She thought about her sister. The girl decided that she never recognizes a stupid girl with her sister. After a while, a guest came to them. The butler introduced her by saying that this was Baroness Willems. She was responsible for Diana etiquette lessons. Baroness sat down in curtsy and said that she was glad to meet. Diana looked at Baroness and thought that she had never heard of her before. She thought that her father put a woman from a little-known family to her. Diana took up the edges of her skirt and, leaning away, replied that she was also glad to meet her. The girl began to be angry, deciding that they want her herself to refuse to become a lady. She said that she was the second daughter of the Resley family. But there was one problem. She wanted to name her name, but her legs got confused, and she fell to the floor. She never studied etiquette in her life to be a lady. She fell face right on the floor, and her etiquette teacher stood and did not budge to somehow help her. An awkward pause hung. It seemed to Diana that Baroness quietly rejoices at her failure, and she even had a thought can still refuse. When the girl got up, Baroness asked her to try again, adding that a greeting is the basis of the foundations. She said that Diana has good posture, so she will learn quickly. She told her ward how to do this correctly. Lift a slightly dress and take one leg back. Diana could not. She clasped her teeth again and again. But each time the Baroness made her a remark and corrected her, asking to repeat more and more. In the end, the teacher began to be angry, saying that Diana was staggering, and again asked her to repeat more, to concentrate and try again. After some time, the girl was tired, and it seemed to her that the word is again, it sounds without a stop. Also her shoes, it was just torture. She said that if you remove them better, the girl thought that she never went in such shoes. But Baroness Willems said that Diana, wants to wear boots with a dress? Then she said that she first had to get used to the shoes. On this, she said goodbye to the girl until tomorrow, and strictly looking at the ward, she said that she hopes that Diana could greet her correctly. The girl was left alone. For some time, she stood thinking about what to do. When a maid came to her, she found Diana sitting on an armchair. The girl awoke, the shoes were lying near her legs, and she looked at them intently. Olga asked what happened to her. Diana did not answer. She only turned away and propped up with her head with her hand to be silent. The maid did not understand what to do. But suddenly the girl picked up and screamed that no, she can. And from this scream, the servant jumped on the spot. Diana put on her shoes again and clenched her fists, asked herself that who was she in any way? The girl was overwhelmed by indignation. She was determined. Only thanks to her willpower, she was able to rush to the commander. Therefore, she will definitely cope with this task. She began to make curtsies again and again. The girl spoke to herself. After each repetition, she asked herself a question, right? And she answered herself that no, finding the next shortcomings. The maid wiped the glass and thought that the young lady was so strange. The next day, when her teacher arrived in the palace, she had something to surprise her. Diana was ready for the next lesson and greeted Lady Willems, making impeccable curtsy. She introduced herself as was appropriate, saying that she was the second daughter of Viscount Resley, Diana Resley. The girl stood and thought that how her efforts would appreciate the Baroness. The girl wondered that this is not excellent, but the teacher was silent. The girl closed her eyes and thought that yesterday she was practiced all night and she wanted to sleep a little. But the teacher asked that yesterday Diana mocked her? The girl was surprised, and Lady Willems said indignantly that if she was so able to do this, then why did she behave inappropriately yesterday? The girl tried to explain to her, but Baroness said displeasedly that she hopes that Diana was not going to carry nonsense now, that she learned this in just one night. The girl wanted to scream that this is true, but instead she asked why she was mocking the teacher. She asked to believe her. Baroness was indignant that how she could believe in such nonsense. But she stopped at a glance and said that her heels... The teacher noticed that the girl washed herself heels to blood. She turned her and asked her that she had wounds. And then Diana said that it was because of the shoes. Baroness asked why she did not call the doctor. But the girl, wondering, looked at her. Diana said that there was only a scratch. She didn't break the bone for herself. Baroness was horrified when she heard it. She asked that the maids did not say anything, even noticing her wound on her leg. Diana retold her conversation with the maid, who did not know what to do and worried that Diana probably hurt, but she did not call the doctor, and then she asked that the girl would eat for lunch and completely forgot about her wounds. Baroness asked that this is all. The girl was surprised that something was wrong, but the teacher did not calm down and asked what she was telling the truth. When Diana replied that yes, Baroness thought about it. She guesses that the girl was openly neglected in this family. The fact that her, far from high society, was called as her teacher. The fact that she is not careful enough and not looked after. She waved her hand to the servant and asked to call the doctor, and she added to bring slippers for the young lady. The doctor arrived soon. Diana sat in a chair and he properly processed her rena on her heels and corns on his fingers. The girl was unpleasant and even painful, but she endured steadily and never complained. And the Baroness, meanwhile, instructed her, putting it in the girl's head that first you need to change your thinking. Diana surprised this. The teacher said that her body is a jewel, and she should protect it from any wounds and damage. The doctor said he finished. Diana, answering the teacher, said that she was thinking this overkill, but she replied that only in this way her value would be valued in full. Lady Willems insisted that Diana should use any methods to stand out against the background of others. She continued her thought and said that higher society is like that. It is like a battlefield for girls. Diana echoed the words. The battlefield. She ran away from her future and chose another path, but again ended up on the battlefield. After a short pause, Lady Willems said that Lady Diana. She asked if she was ready to fight in this war of high society. The girl replied that she thinks it would be interesting. At the same time, her eyes lit up with genuine interest and a smile played on her lips. Lady Willems was glad that the girl was happy to respond. She smiled back at her, and then she held out her hand and said that it was fine. She promised that she would help her to win in every battle of her. The girl in response extended her hand to her and said that she hoped for Baroness. And she, in response, squeezing a small palm in her hands with a conspiratorial tone, she replied that she was also on her. The girl thought that war is her profile, and Baroness added that she needs to be prepared for what awaits her. The evening went down to the royal palace of Agricophon. The royal family is arranging a banquet every year on Orville Day. This is a party that all the aristocrats of the kingdom of Agriphones should visit, under the pretext that it is a place of friendship and consent of high society. In the banquet hall, Viscount Resley entered the hand with the eldest daughter, and Diana was walking behind them herself. In other words, this was the battlefield, but instead of a sword and shield, hypocrisy and false smiles are here. If it was a sword and a shield, Diana would not doubt herself. But now the girl realized that she would be hard here. She decided to go out with fresh air. She pushed the heavy door and went out into the street in a cool night air. She went to the railing and was surprised to find a person below. He seemed familiar to her. She recognized him. He, like her, was a child, but it was him. He stood below. The moonlight illuminated his bright silver hair. His shoulders covered a dark cloak, the floors of which fluttered in the wind. Diana surprised why he is here. The boy also looked at her with his big blue eyes, and the question was also read in these eyes. She continued to peer into him, remembering his name, Cornelius Haman, the person who will become the commander of the army Heberunius. The girl was so shocked by this meeting that she did not hear how someone approached her and grabbed by the elbow. She turned and looked at the man who grabbed her. It was a court knight. He said that it was dangerous to lean out of the railing and took the girl not a safe distance. But I did not let go. He had blonde hair and a violet color of his eyes. His name was Bancroft Cool. He asked her where her guardian. The girl was confused. She did not know who it was. She thought that if she had been like before, it would have ended with the fact that she would just have fought off him, having presented him that he wanted to die and how dared to grab her hand. But now it was necessary to behave like a lady. She politely said, could he let her go? The knight immediately bounced off her and began to ask for forgiveness, realizing that he had violated etiquette. Diana rubbed her elbow and, turning her head, looked over her shoulder. The knight asked that she was probably unpleasant, but at that moment she thought that there was no one below. And did she really seem to her? The knight again apologized to her and said that she was still better not to walk alone here. He asked her to go to the banquet hall. The girl looked at him and remembered who this knight and his name was. He was so young that she barely recognized him. She heard that he had a low position for a long time. Diana said that she would stand a little here, but the knight did not retreat. He said that in this case he would stand on the watchman. Diana remembered that it was said as if his irreversibility prevented an increase in his position, but the main reason was not that. The girl introduced herself, saying that she was the second daughter of the Resley family, and her name is Diana Resley. She asked his name. He named his name. She asked that Krall is a kind of hereditary title. The guy hid a little, and modestly replied that it was. The fact that the title in his family is not transmitted by generations, it means that by origin it is commoner. This was very different from aristocratic families with a hereditary title. He was not promoted because of its origin. The knight said that if she was embarrassed by his origin, he would ask someone else. But Diana replied that no. She laid her hand on her heart and said that his sword was talking about the knight, and not origin. The girl said that she would be an honor for her if such a worthy knight would stand on the watchman. He did not know what to say to her warm words. And then he bent before her and said that she could call him Ben. Diana wanted to tell him that it is possible now difficult times for him, but he should be attached. But she could not say that in the future all the knights would admire them. But the guy did not even know this smiling. While Diana was talking with Bancroft, on the street the servant reported her ward, young man whom Lady Resley saw. He said in displeasure that the young master be careful, because they are not in the Cheberunia, but in Agrisophane. Okay, he began to insist on arrival here, but in order to secretly penetrate the palace. His indignation knew no bounds. Cornelius Hymen was the second son of the Duke of Empire Hiberunius. He threw off the hood and smiled at his indignant servant. And he asked why he was with him. They walked around the night city, and the servant continued to be indignant that he certainly would not die at such a pace with his death. But Cornelius thought about his. He said that he finally met her. And this surprised the servant. He stopped and asked whom, but Cornelius was not going to spread to this. He did not even stop, but silently continued to go, and his servant again went in a fit from the fact that someone could recognize him. He called out his young master, but he did not answer. His face was lit by a smile, and he hurriedly walked forward. Now he was convinced that she really exists in reality. He had long dreamed of dreams. In them he saw some woman. She is a knight and participates in battles. He dreams how she removes her helmet after the next battle and looks at the sky. She has long hair of red color. She says that how tired she was from all this, and he invisibly watched her. And it was surprising that when he saw her, the insatiable thirst disappeared in him. An unknown thirst that pursued him since he had memories. For him, who is like a dried earth, it has become a fertile rain. After that, he often watched the dreams of her life. He dreamed when she first picked up a sword, she was still a child, and then later her first battle, and her last moment. He watched how she was seized on the outskirts of the forest, and he was there. Not at all in your mind. This thirst eventually brought him to madness. Little Cornelius looked at her, and the adult asked about how her last words would be. He saw the sparkle of her green eyes and heard the words that she was killed with one blow because she could not stand. Little Cornelius was afraid, not believing that this was the end. The executioner waved his sword and he woke up from his scream. His hand stretched to stop it, and he asked to stop. Wait. Together with her death, his dreams ceased. He woke up and remembered her smile. He was ready to go to anything to see this smile again. And now he turned to Holter, his servant, and asked him for a dagger. The servant was surprised and asked why he had a dagger. And when the knife nevertheless found himself in the hands of Cornelius, he put him to his hair pulled into his tail. The boy cut his hair in one motion, leaving only a small tail. He thought about whether he could meet her on the battlefield, and did not have time to exclaim the hall what he was doing, as Cornelius removed his hair and a dagger from his head. He threw his hair to the ground and ordered that they were returning. But the servant did not know what to do. Take the abandoned hair or leave it. Cornelius was already far ahead, and Holter had to run after him, catching up. And Cornelius decided for himself that he wanted to meet her again at all costs, even if he has to learn the ownership of the sword. After some time, Diana again received a lesson from Lady Willems at the estate of the family of Resley. The woman said that today they will have a theory. Baroness asked what the lady means in her understanding. Diana thought about it. She even covered her eyes with tension. She uncertainly said that it was a girl. And then she was visited by the thought that this is a girl in a dress, an aristocrat. Brushing, she described her as all such graceful, luxurious, sweet. She was waiting for approval from the Baroness, but she silently, slowly poured tea into a cup. After a pause, the Baroness answered simply that the lady is creatures who need protection. She continued to slowly pour tea and added her head without raising her head, because valuable always needs to be defended. This is the basis for the lady. Then she took the cup in her hands and said that she would ask the question again. And again, she asked what the lady means. This time Diana exclaimed that she was Diana Resley. There was so much enthusiasm in her gaze. Lady Willems patiently closed her eyes, and Diana asked what was not right. She uncertainly repeated that she was a lady, and Baroness blinked her lips with a napkin that she was right and well done. The girl sighed and seemed upset, as if remembered that she was like a lady. The Baroness thought that no one in this estate protects this girl, and she, too, will not be able to help her in high society. Lady Willems decided that she had to learn to defend herself, and for this you need to give her a weapon, and she said that she should use her innate beauty. The teacher again drank from the cup and continued to say that for the lady to have a beautiful appearance is a great advantage. In addition, especially attractive ladies with red hair. Diana sat with her head lowering. She was tormented by doubts and uncertainty. She asked about whether to do this. She did not like her red hair. And for the knights, they are completely useless. Moreover, they even interfere. Due to the emerging appearance, she had to endure more insults in her direction. Men made her obscene offers. She remembered how she taught the hooligans and said that this was not repeated if they teach them the lesson once. But Lady Willems asked that then who would protect her before she leaves this estate. This question surprised Diana. She did not think that it would be necessary to leave this estate. But the next phrase of the Baroness was even more unexpected. She asked that Diana was not going to get married. The girl looked at her teacher, opening her eyes. She didn't even think about it. Lady Willems continued, saying that she needed to get human hearts, and then her appearance will play into her hands. She recommended for start with her maid Olga. Baroness continued her thought, saying that Olga is a man who is constantly with her, so she must make Olga be on her side. The girl seemed upset. She thought that she really did not want to do all this. But it turns out that if she decided not to pick up a sword, she needs at least one weapon to protect. The girl laid a hand on her heart, asked what she had to do. This conversation made a great impression on her. She walked along the corridor and thought about marriage. Yes, Lady Willems was right. If not chivalry, then marriage is waiting for her. And she never thought about marriage. Her thoughts interrupted. In the corridor, she met Regina and her teacher. He said that today the lesson is over. He said that if she is always so unprepared, then they will not be able to continue their lessons. Diana thought that she was scolded again. Regina was silent, and tears shone in her eyes. The teacher, leaving, said that tomorrow he would check her homework and asked her to prepare well. The girl, bowing her head, promised to do this. At that moment, Diana passed her, but did not go unnoticed. Regina called her by telling her, "Hey, you." Diana stopped, and Regina yelled, asking that she was only grinning. She screamed so that Diana had her ears from her squeak. But Regina was seriously angry. She jumped to her younger sister and squeezed her fist, shouted that she would not leave it just like that. Diana could not understand what she was talking about. "I just thought that Regina again took up her own, like a dog." The sister continued to scream that Diana was staring at the wrong eyes. She demanded that the younger sister, if unhappy with something, then spoke about it right away and called her a dumbass. And Diana at that time was absorbed in thoughts that it was interesting who she would marry. The girl hoped that he would at least be beautiful. She raised her head and noticed her maid, which walked along the corridor in their direction with a basket in her hands. Diana remembered what Lady Willems told her. First, you need to start with a maid. The most important thing is to cause compassion. Diana listened, and the governess taught her that the girl understands how important it is to keep in mind how she looks from the outside. Beauty attracts views. Lady Willems raised her finger up and said that if beauty would be combined with sadness, then this would cause a desire to protect in another person, and Diana should adhere to this rule. The girl thought that there was a good opportunity, and Regina continued to scream, her hands on her sides, asking that Diana at least hears her. Olga came closer and asked in surprise, "What happened?" Diana thought that she had to bow her head and ask Regina's forgiveness, saying that she was to blame for everything. Regina clasped her teeth with anger. She did not understand why Diana behaves like that. And Diana at this time said that she should help her in everything. Then tears appeared before her eyes flowed down her cheeks, and she began to wipe them. She said that she was so sorry that she did not go out to become a support for her, and she again asked her to forgive. In the eyes of the maid Olga, sympathy will immediately appear in her direction. She will be so sorry for her young lady. Diana thought she should do something like this, and at this time Sister Regina was coming to her. She called her small and demanded that she answer. Diana thought that it was easy, and with one sharp movement she put her sister to the wall. She was scared and screamed that she was doing, "Is it crazy?" Diana replied that she did not say. She smirked guiltily and said that she should help her in everything. So? But Regina screamed heartily with fright and raised her hands uphill as if preparing to defend herself. The maid Olga extended his face with the surprise that her lady behaved so rudely. Diana closed her eyes and thought she was just excellent, excellent. Out of the corner of her eyes she looked at the maid and noted that she liked Olga's face. But at that moment Regina yelled, as if Harold and her scream swayed an echo along the corridor. Diana pulled away from the screaming sister and cringed. And while Regina ran away and called her father on the go, Diana was annoyed that she did not want to achieve this. The girl could not understand that she was mistaken somewhere, but behind her there was a maid and looked depressed after Regina. And when Diana looked at her, she shied aside, trying not to look a young lady in the eye. This surprised Diana. She did not understand why Olga avoids visual contact. Diana thought about what is the problem, and Olga passing by said that she was still. She looked at her lady, said that she even felt better. Olga had a pleased look. Diana was delighted and thanked her. She still decided that she succeeded. But Olga said that she should not be so happy. The lady had such an awesome face. And she added that Diana was thinking a bit overwhelmed. And it is not surprising that a 12-year-old girl could not withstand the pressure of her facial expression. But for Diana it was incomprehensible what she did wrong. She went with a maid and on the way asked why she said she was getting better. She was offended by Regina. Olga sighed and said that she did not even want to remember. The maid said that once she found pebbles in her food. Another time, the clothes that Olga rested for a long time was torn everything. The girl sighed and said that all sorts of so small but very unpleasant nasty things. Diana thought that she did not even know about it. The girl thought about the fact that in the past life was the same, and I decided that it was necessary to find evidence. Olga asked what then, and Diana, having made a hooligan face, said that they would smear her along the wall. Olga said that the young lady was not appropriate to express herself. They continued their paths. Diana put forward a new version, saying that then she had to smear her properly, but the maid again asked that this was except for something different. Suddenly for Diana, Olga thanked her. The girl asked incomprehensibly, for what? Olga, small smiling, said that she did not think that the lady would be so worried about her and show care. The girl looked at her maid in surprise. That is what she tried to achieve when she argued with Regina. They went on, and Olga asked that Lady Regina would not tell about everything master. After all, Diana could fly. But the girl bravely replied that let her tell. She thought that maybe everything did not work out quite as she expected. Olga smiled and asked that Diana wasn't scared. But she replied that they scolded them so scolded, he will not lose her. The final result suited her. After some time, a messenger father came to her room and said that the master was calling her. Olga nervously squeezed her fingers, and Diana replied that she was coming. When she walked along the corridor behind the servant, she thought that why her father was so predictable, just like in the palm of your hand. The servant who was walking ahead quietly looked at Diana. He noted that she is confidently holding on, and this is very different from Lady Regina. He thought that the baby is very similar to the deceased mistress. It seemed to him as if he sees her in her. He stopped and turned to her by naming her Lady Diana. The girl looked at him, and he said that he had what to say before she went to the master. Most likely the gentleman was now with Lady Regina. The servant told that she recently came to him all in tears, and the gentleman was very alarmed from the fact that his daughter was crying. Regina said that nothing was like, but he ran to the eldest daughter, asking her who did this with her, and he suggested that this is Diana. The servant said that his father continued to ask that Diana did something to her again. He said that she had to call her right now, but Regina said that she was not necessary. And she added that Diana is not to blame for anything. This is all her fault, because she is too stupid. But the master was adamant and demanded that Diana be called to him right now. The servant added that he knows that the girl did nothing bad, and Lady Regina has a habit of embellish everything. The butler said with regret that although it would be unfair, but still Lady Diana should ask the master's forgiveness. The servant wanted to say that then he is definitely, but the girl interrupted him, thanking him for the advice. She, smiling, said that she would take everything into account. She turned and went to the door of her father's office, and the servant watched her and was surprised that when this baby managed to grow up like that. When Diana entered the office, her father stood crossing her hands on her chest, and her half-sister Regina was hiding behind him. The father was upset and sternly called her by name. Regina at that time smiled and looked around her father's back, showing her sister's tongue. Viscount Resley, meanwhile, strictly said that Regina told him everything. He asked the youngest daughter how she dares to look at her sister and threaten to kill her. The girl only thought that when she said that. But his father continued, demanding an answer. Where did she get all this? Diana thought that perhaps on her part it all looked like a threat. And she only thought that this time she could definitely place him to her. How he said that he had to talk to Lady Willems, who was responsible for her lessons. The expression on his face changed. He seemed to be frightened by something, and Regina stopped making faces and looked at her frightenedly. Then his father was completely taken aback by horror on his face, asked what she was now. What is she doing at all? Diana's face also transformed. Her eyes lit a bright light and seemed a damn thing in her. She insidiously said that okay, and she said that she was apologizing. Father, squinting at Regina, ordered her to go to her room right now. Moreover, he demanded that she fulfill his order immediately. He turned out to be between two daughters, and when Regina was moving under the wall began to leave the room, he said that she was well done, that let it go away. Diana and her father were left alone. He coughed and again asked her where did she learn all this. The girl, not understanding the reasons for his discontent, said that she brought her sincere apology with a smile on her face. But her father, holding his head, asked her not to show her this smile anymore. He looked at her and thought that he was afraid of his own daughter, and reflexively began to look for a dagger. He again crossed his arms over his chest and said that, as he thought, the etiquette lessons did not suit her, and she needs to engage in a sword. But the girl stubbornly and persistently said that she did not want to do this. And then she repeated once again that she said, I did not want to. Father looked at her with displeasure with his eyebrows. He was silent. Diana also looked at him without looking away. This view said that it would not give in. He turned away and said that good. They will do so. He will give her 2 months. During this time, it should perfectly master the basics of etiquette. He clenched his fists with such force that the knuckles of his fingers crushed. Father added that they will soon choose a maid for Princess Juliana, and Diana should become her servant. This was his condition. He stood his back to her, even when he said that if she did not become a servant, he would send her to the training ground. He asked if she understood him. She was silent. The girl looked at her father's back and thought that the damn Viscount and the devil's sword. She was angry, but did not dare to openly rebel. Immediately after the conversation with her father, she left the estate of Resley and went to the park, which surrounded him. The girl walked along the path and thought that she would be a servant of Princess Juliana. The path from the old tree blocked her path. Apparently, she had been lying there for a long time, because even mushrooms were overgrown with her. The girl decided to jump over her and picked up her skirts, pushed away from the ground, and jumped. She landed on the other side of the deck, right in the middle of the path, without falling and not injuring herself. She straightened up and thought, what kind of nonsense was this? Ahead seemed a lake. It was a secret place that she knew about. The girl sat on a stump on the shore and, closing her eyes, remembered that when her mother scolded her, she often hid here. Diana looked at the water and thought that how to be a servant of the princess. But can she? She again began to master anger, and she grabbed a branch in her hands lying at her feet and, squeezing her, thought that she could just take it and kill everyone. The branch in her hands lit up with a bright green flame. Diana looked at her and thought. She waved it like a sword and realized that there was no feeling of patriotism in her. There is no family or friends. She brought the luminous branch to her face and thought that she would simply sell the military secrets of Hibernia and run there. She thought about her maid and decided that she would need to take her with her. The problem was only in one. Who will believe her words? Now she is only a little girl. The light from the branch was reflected in her eyes, and she suddenly caught herself thinking that that man, Cornelius. She was sure that he would believe her. Diana remembered him in a past life. Yes, Cornelius Haman, that naive madman. This happened in the past, when there was a war against Hibernia. She received mail. The messenger put it on the table, where she filled the papers. She was then the deputy captain. Diana took him in her hands and said that there was no press on the letter. Who could send it? When she opened the letter and read its contents, she was very surprised. After all, it was about the mystery of Hibernia. Diana considered that she could trust this information and went on the attack, using those knowledge. Later, she received another message and she found out about the source of that secret letter. It was sent by Hymen, the detachment on which they attacked, headed by Cornelius's older brother. She could not even think that he would use her, his enemy, to get rid of his older brother. She decided to return home, but still thought that that madman would go to everything to achieve his goal. She decided that he would definitely believe her, but then she doubted that it was better to stay away from such madmen. If she suddenly meets him, you need to run without turning around. For some reason, it hurts. She was surprised because the pain came from the hand in which she held the branch. The girl looked at the hand and branch and saw that she blushed and burned her hand with fire. It was a new sensation, and the new energy unknown to her. Diana scaredly threw the branch aside. The girl herself fell to the ground and looked scaredly at the branch that fell nearby. She became ordinary gray. Diana crawled closer to her, thinking about what could seem to her. Maybe she has vision problems? She touched the branch, and she instantly became green. The girl again took her in her hand and exhaled with relief, thinking what nevertheless seemed to her. But after a second, she again became red. The girl could not understand what it was. She thought that she hates red. From all that she possessed, she loved the color of her aura. But why now he has become red? She thought that it could somehow be connected with the fact that she returned to the past. The branch in her hands cracked and crumbled, and the girl holding a compressed fist thought that what was wrong with her? She stubbornly thought that she would not be a man if she again picks up a sword, and if this happens, then she will consider herself a monster. At this time, the Viscount thanked the man for recommending Viscountessm Resley in the royal palace. He added that as that person recommended, they will begin to prepare Diana. The man sitting at the table and considering the book said that there was no gratitude. Viscount asked why the choice fell on Diana. Viscount Resley said that of course she is his daughter, but not as smart as we would like. He suggested that they could waste time, and then he said that maybe his first daughter would have coped better. But the man sitting at the book only mowed his eyes on the Viscount, and he without words realized that it was inappropriate to ask questions. Resley immediately bowed in reverence and asked him to forgive, and the man got up from the table and raising his finger up the mountain said that something else. Viscount looked at him in all eyes and did not understand what else he needed to do, what other conditions would be. And when he returned home, Diana was informed that from today, a certain person will be her knight. This was the same condition. At the same time, Viscount did not show much joy, and Regina was completely displeased. Viscount introduced her to a knight, whose name was Bancroft Cool. The guy worshipped Diana with respect and said that the honor to serve her for him. The girl was also surprised by such a coincidence. The guy was clearly glad of such a meeting because he said that they met again, and at the same time a smile illuminated him. Diana called him first by the name of Crawl. Then she remembered that he allowed him to call him by name, and recovering him called Ben, asked what he was doing here, and what about his service in the palace? But when he said that he had thrown the palace to become her knight, she took her head and thought that there was a headache. This one is also clearly out of mind. Some are ready to sell the soul for a place in the palace. Viscount Resley watched Diana talking to the knight. His gaze was focused and strict, and his eldest daughter Regina at that time fiddled with the sleeve of his camisole and whimpered, "What to understand?" Viscount turned and went away. Regina called him, but he threw it on the go that he could not do anything. Regina looked enviously towards Diana and the knight. She nervously bit her finger and could not believe that Diana received a knight before her. Diana looked at Bancroft and asked him why he made such a decision. The girl said that being a knight would be more profitable for him to stay at the palace. Vacation will not be a good help in an increase. But he replied that he did not care about it. He reminded her that, as she already knows from the low class, of course he was lucky to become a knight at the royal court, but the comrades treated him as a garbage. He remembered how Diana smiled at him, and he continued to say that those words that she told him that his sword was saying his sword, and not the origin, that it would be an honor for her if such a worthy knight would stand up. And now he said that he had heard such words for the first time. She was the first person who judged him by the sword, and not by origin. And then he decided that he would serve her. He, kneeling in front of her and expressing his respects, said that now his sword belongs to her. Diana looked at him, and the past reminded her. She too, once, wanted her to be judged by the sword, and not by the floor, and she perfectly understood his feelings. She sighed and said that since he was saying so, then she could not do anything. Ben thanked her, and at that moment Regina approached them. She said that she was glad to meet the knight Crawl. She made a curtsy, and smiling at her, introduced herself, saying that she was the eldest daughter of Viscount Resley, Regina Resley. Regina smiled, but behind her smile was bad thoughts that even though the knight belongs to Diana, she would just take him. She climbed out of her skin, trying to seem sweet. Regina said that since they became one family, then she will also hope for him. And so that there were no awkwardness, she asked if she could also call him by name. She looked into his eyes and thought that soon he would understand everything, that he is better off being her knight and not that miserable Diana. Bancroft, in turn, also carefully looked at Regina. He did not answer her question, and so she said him again. But he smiled and replied that no. And then he turned to Diana and, calling her the lady, suggested going from here, leaving Regina alone. Diana went with him, asking him he would not want to look around here. Regina was dejected. She did not expect to hear a refusal, and therefore, listening to as her sister, they were moving away with her new knight, silently angry. She felt offended. After some time, Baroness Willems arrived at the estate of Resley again. This time she brought Threads and Heels with her. This was the next stage of training. And it was a new challenge to Diana. The governess said that for the lady, embroidery is a necessary skill, and the girl had to master this science. She sat and diligently tried to take the stitches. Olga came up to her and leaned, asked that she was going to engage in embroidery. The girl focusedly replied that yes. The maid smiled and encouraged her lady, saying that she was sure of her will certainly succeed and wished her good luck and patience. She turned and went away from the room, and Diana, looking at her in the wake, thought that for some reason it sounded offensive. But she again concentrated in her lesson, optimistically saying that she concentrated perfectly and again on a needle with a thread. The girl held a needle with her fingers, and she instantly began to shine with green light. And then Diana stuck her into the fabric, and at the same moment pierced the fabric through, breaking through a huge hole through which not only the needle climbed, but also her hand. The girl stuck the needle in a soft rug and thought about the fact that the embroidery was always such a dangerous occupation. She didn't even notice how she released the aura. The girl tried to calm down. She took a few breaths and exhalations, remembered that she was not in the war, and she would not fight with anyone. Then she took the heels again and concentrated on embroidery, so some time passed. And in the end, she looked at the result of her work and joyfully exclaimed what she did. She looked at the embroidered flower and a stalk with leaves. It looked simple, but she encouraged herself that this time she did not perfume the fabric. Diana Resley completed her first embroidery in her life. So with hard work and under the strict supervision of Lady Willems, Diana slowly learned to be a lady. But, as usual, Lady Willems's gaze was very strict. She, honing the skill of Diana, all the time found something to complain about. At first she stated that she was doing an exercise without a soul, and when the girl looked at her in surprise, she replied that she was too assertive for the lady. Baroness said that it was rather a gait of a knight, not a lady. Diana wanted to notice that this is a very accurate hit. And the governess continued that true ladies walk with a light gait, like a feather, and their steps resemble waves of the wings of a butterfly. The girl looked at her, and she continued to say that one posture would not correct all this, and then she still asked, understands whether Diana was talking about. Diana waved her hand as if dispersing the butterflies, and said that she never understood. Baroness Willem sighed, and then seeing that Diana was tired, she offered to finish the lesson for today. After some time, Diana sat on the steps of the stairs and propped her head with her hands that why walk like a lady is so hard, one suffering. The girl's attention attracted some movement. She was immediately alert. But looking between the railing, she saw Regina. She walked somewhere along the corridor. Diana noted that she has a great gait. Regina became uncomfortable. She noted that some strange feeling, as if a chill had run down his back. Diana suddenly came to the head of the idea that she could try to repeat after Regina. She decided to try. The girl got to her feet and picked up her skirt so that she did not interfere. Then I remembered the words of the Baroness about the feather and the wings of the butterfly. And then she lit up with the thought that how she did not remember before. In addition to Regina, she had another model for imitation. The image of her mother surfaced in her memory, the most impeccable model she knew. Her mother was a princess, so she knew the royal family etiquette. The girl closed her eyes and tried to remember how she went. It was so long ago that she could hardly remember. In her memory, the image of her mother and her, completely baby, surfaced again. The girl strained the whole memory to try to remember everything that is connected with her mother. She completely turns the body to the side where she wants to go. Spreads his shoulders, holds the perfect posture. Her steps are measured and small. Diana opened her eyes and thought that she had to completely copy the movements of her body. She seemed to feel the presence of her mother behind her, and reflexively leveled the posture. At this time, Himiman was a commotion in the Herzogs' empire. A servant burst into the office of His Highness. The Archduke made him a remark about the fact that he was shouting, and he said that he asked not to make noise and not to run. But the servant was very excited. He said that something was incredible. The second young gentleman. But the Archduke interrupted him, saying that if Cornelius again learned something crazy, then let the servant deal with this himself. But he replied that this was not so. The Duke looked testfully at the servant, but he insisted that it was better to look at the Duke at himself. It was a hall where the knights learned to control the sword. They stood in groups and watched someone, whispering quietly. And on the parade ground, Cornelius, holding a sword in his hands, worked out the methods of attack and defense. The Duke entered the hall. His face was focused and strict. And in the eyes there was a surprise. He looked closely as if he did not believe in what he saw. He asked what Cornelius was doing. What is he doing now? The guy wiped his hand with a sweat that flowed over his face, and his servant twisted his finger at the temple, thinking that Cornelius had a disorder with his head. Archduke Himiman Hiberunius. Their family consisted of 4 people: the Archduke, the Duchess, his older brother, and his. Cornelius was the second son of Archduke. From childhood he demonstrated his outstanding intelligence. But unfortunately he was weak in the body due to the thirst for unclear origin. Therefore he was very sensitive and irritable, and in the end, when his patience reached the edge, this was manifested by eccentric behavior. Herzduke again asked what he is doing now. He was annoyed, and therefore Cornelius lowered his sword and looked over his shoulder at his father. The Duke was waiting for an answer. It seemed on his face every muscle was tense. Cornelius also silently looked at his father. Drops of sweat continued on his face. The servant of Cornelius Holder wanted to explain what was happening, but the Duke did not listen, only briefly ordered Cornelius to follow him into his office. The boy silently looked into his father's back, and the teacher began to be nervous that they had problems. When he entered the office, his father stood near the window. He did not turn. Continuing to look out the window, he said that he did not know what he found on Cornelius once he decided to learn the art of a sword. He stated that the sword is not his, and given that Cornelius in this state only because he rose to the 4th floor, all the more he must understand his father. The boy really experienced malaise. He stood the floor with his knees bending his knees and resting his hands on them, tried to catch his breath. The Duke still looked out the window. He said that the tutor, from whom Cornelius refused, sent a letter of protest. He asked what did not suit him this time, but the boy replied that he had nothing to learn from him. The Duke turned and, shifting his eyebrows, looked at his son. The letter said that the boy had prepared a stack of books, and when the tutor asked what it was, he replied that the books, and he added that if the tutor was against his opinion even after reading these books, then let him send him a letter. He promised him that he would answer. The Duke sighed, closing his eyes. He said that the tutor wrote that the second son of the Erzderkog was a self-confident rude. But the boy continued to repeat that while he was listening to his nonsense, his ears did not dry out. What else should he do? The Duke looked at his son again and made him an unexpected offer. Does he want to learn from him? Cornelius looked at his father and thought that his words mean that he wanted to declare him his successor. The boy replied that he did not want to. The excerpt refused the Duke, and he shouted so that his son would change his mind. But the boy asked why his father is so angry. He did not understand what they wanted from him, and then he asked his father what he forgot. What did he call him when he was little? The Duke was taken aback. He did not know what to say. He remembered the little Cornelius and what he called his small monster. The Duke turned away from his son and again sat down at the table, began to examine the book with records. He was silent. The boy smiled quietly with his lips. He won. He turned and, leaving the office, said that with the permission of the Duke he would go. Father got up from the table and wanted to call him, but did not dare. Cornelius walked along the corridor and thought about what was the case in the title of Archduke. He was sure that these were ordinary shackles, and he decided that let his stupid older brother do this, and let him not touch him. The servant Holter, with whom they dealt with this, came out to meet him. He asked in alarm whether everything was in order to Cornelius, but the boy called him to go with him. Holter smiled at thinking that probably his owner scolded him properly, and now he would definitely stop training. He was in high spirits and therefore asked which library Cornelius wants to go. The boy looked at him with a serious look of blue eyes and asked what he was talking about. And then he added that he goes to the training ground. After all, they have not yet finished with training. Cornelius walked ahead and peremptorily stated that this physical weakness got it. He decided to squeeze out all the juices otherwise, and Hall behind him was very upset that the boy had not yet thrown out this stupidity from his head. He caught up with Cornelius and said that he had a question for him. The boy answered him to ask. Holter asked why he suddenly wanted to learn the art of a sword. He did not like to move once again before. Holter recalled that the young gentleman always walked in a book, excluding time for meals and sleep. He spent his leisure surrounded by books. Cornelius looked at Holter and in turn asked him to believe his eyes if he met a girl out of his sleep in reality. If it really existed. Cornelius picked up a sword. It seemed to him that it cost considerable effort. The Holter stood nearby, but he really did not understand anything from what the boy asked him about. But Cornelius, leaning over the sword, said that it would not matter for him to believe Holter or not. He picked up the sword up. The guy thought that she, a girl from his dreams, loves her sword, and these thoughts seemed to give him strength. Cornelius swung and finally began to reach Holter. He asked what the young master was seriously speaking, and then indignantly asked that they went to Agricart because of this. Cornelius was silent, but Holter insisted. He asked him to answer him, but the boy ordered him to shut up. He looked at the sword and thought about something concentrated. I thought that she was him. If they lived in one country, he would try to lure her with sweets, a sword, or in some other way. His gaze overshadowed because they live in different countries. How to be now, he understood that it would be hard. Holter fought in a hysterical seizure, and Cornelius thought for sure he found the answer. War. We must take advantage of the war. He became joyful again. He came up with a plan. He will definitely grab her. Provided as successful as it seemed to him by the idea, he announced a break for 10 minutes. Holder looked after him and thought about that unknown girl. He wanted to tell her that she would run and would not look back, and then hunting began on it. The palace of the kingdom of Argafan was drowned in colorful colors. The princess is not the only one who walked around the park that day. There were many other girls, and some of them drew the attention of others, having said that everyone would look in the direction where the princess was accompanied by his retinue. This caused some surprise that she went for a walk. Some of the girls noted that she is so elegant. The girls looked at her and suggested that the king was probably proud of his daughter. She is such an elegant princess of their kingdom. It was Julian Agrafan, the only princess of this kingdom. She called out a baby who caught up with them from behind. Juliana turned around. She saw how the girl rushed to her and called her a waving hand. The girl ran up and greeted Her Highness to the princess. Juliana said Agnes that she was surprised because she did not think that she would meet her here. But the girl said that she specially came here because she knew that Juliana would be here. She also said that she heard that she would have a friend soon. It was Agnes Agricophon, the illegitimate daughter of the king. Juliana said that the news is quickly flying up. Agnes was delighted that her sister was very lucky. She added that if she lived in the palace, she would always play with her. The girl said that she was very sorry that she did not live here, Juliana said. They went further together. Agnes, without ceasing, said that she was jealous of Julian. She was lucky to live in such a palace. She all repeated that if they lived together, they would play and have fun every day. She endlessly asked, "What's the truth?" This child seemed to be everywhere, and her energy did not run out. She said that she could ask her father about it. She asked Julian, what does she think her father will fulfill her request? Juliana walked silently, and Agnes was eager to hear the answer, and she once again asked that her sister princess was thinking about this. Juliana was hard to withstand such a pressure. She wanted peace. She turned to the girl that was walking next to her. She asked that she probably dried up in her throat. The princess asked that maybe she would not refuse a cup of tea, but the girl replied that everything was in order and refused. The princess objected that she was saying incessantly, and she is worried that she will damage the vocal cords. The girl with red hair and green eyes joyfully said that the princess was worried about her. She called her sister and added that she was so caring. The girl again fucked up, saying that she was so glad that she is related to such a wonderful person, but the princess said this time, only squinting at the girl. The baby promised that she would come to her another time and ran on. Juliana said that if Agnes next time would be in the palace, it would be better for them to change the place of walk to another garden. They went on. Juliana thought about Agnes. For some reason, she did not like her. She said that Diana Resley should become her servant if she was not mistaken. The maid replied that it was. She said that this is the second daughter of Viscount Resley, and she added that she has related ties with the princess. She is the daughter of Her Highness Princess Vivian. Juliana snorted, saying that she would give the princess for Viscount, and then she added that her father was harsh in his decision. The maid added that besides the princess was the second wife of Viscount. And this discovery was completely struck by Julian. She thought about the one who will soon become her servant, about Diana Resley. Some time passed, and on the estate of Resley, everyone said goodbye to Diana. The hour of her departure to the palace came. Baroness Willems said goodbye to her ward. She said that she was proud of her because she became the servant of the princess. She added that she was glad for her. The woman wiped the descending tears. She really was sorry to let her go. She said that it was not for nothing that she had taught her so hard all this time. Diana made impeccable curtsy and said that Baroness was flattering her. She said that only thanks to the hard work of Lady Willems she was able to achieve such results. Baroness agreed, saying that Diana is right, and this was an incredible transformation, the most impossible challenge that she threw herself in her whole life. Diana looked at her in all eyes, and Baroness continued to say that in any case she became a worthy lady. To be a servant of Her Highness of the Princess is an honorable place, and this will be a good beginning. The girl said she would remember this, and Baroness said that she would be late and pushed her to the carriage. Near the carriage, her knight Bancroft Crowle expected her. He gave her a hand to help climb into the carriage, and when she took her place, he sat on the horse and prepared to accompany her on this journey. Diana said that she was leaving. Baroness Willems stood and waved a handkerchief while the carriage drove away from the estate. She wished them a good path. Viscount Resley turned and went to the estate. The wires were finished. Regina called out to her father. She had questions to him. The girl asked with a claim that he would really send Diana. She asked that this is not some kind of mistake. The girl was clearly not happy. She demandingly asked that why not she, Regina, but Diana went to the palace. He turned away and continued his journey, but the eldest daughter did not calm down. She asked what would happen if Diana makes a mistake in relation to the princess. Viscount said that the decision was made and was not subject to revision. The girl called him, but he no longer stopped, and she remained unanswered. Regina could not believe that her father could do so. She fell to the ground and hid in hysteria from powerlessness to change something. She yelled that all this infuriates her. The carriage, meanwhile, was gaining move and continued to move away from the estate of Resley. Diana was in her alone, and she was a little sad from the fact that she leaves her native places and at such a young age begins a new life. Bancroft, driving nearby, asked her, "Is she worried? Soon after all, she will meet with the princess." The girl replied that she was worried. Ben said that he thought so. Diana covered her eyes, trying to cope with excitement. She thought that the palace was almost like a house, but not so. Nevertheless, the battlefield is closer. Ben said that she still did not worry much. Her carriage drove into the main gate of the royal palace, and Bancroft told her that the princess was a very kind person, and she is very mature. He laughed, and added that not so much like Lady Diana. She seemed to him older her peers. The girl thought that it goes without saying. She thought how old she had hit her. It was he who seemed to be some kind of immature in her eyes. She looked out the window at the surrounding landscape, and thought that she knew about which person Princess Julian. She wanted to stay away from her, but they had already arrived in the palace. She was met by the senior maid of her highness. She greeted Lady Resley and said that she would tell her about her duties as a princess maid. But before, several assistants examined it from all sides. They intently examined her from the top of the head to the heels. As a result, the older maid said that her clothes were consistent and asked to wear the same neatly. Then she turned and asked Diana to follow her, went along the corridor. She continued to instruct Diana to say that from now on she would become the face of her highness. I asked not to forget that Diana's reputation would influence the reputation of her highness. The older maid walked in front and without turning around asked Diana to understand. The girl was silent. They went to the door and the maid knocked on the door, saying that Lady Resley had come. They were replied that they could come in. The door was opened and Diana went inside and the maid remained standing behind the door. Diana saw the princess as soon as she entered the room. She sat in an armchair at the table and without turning her head towards Diana, asked that she was Lady Resley. The princess, still without turning her head, said that she was glad to meet. A barely noticeable smile appeared on her face. Diana made a curtsy and thought that the princess in her youth was a beauty. She introduced herself, which was the second daughter of Viscount Resley, and she said that Diana Resley was welcoming the flower of the empire, Her Highness Princess Julian. The girl thought that for the first time she was so close to the princess, and Juliana, in turn, asked her to raise her head. The princess said that she had no friends of the peers, so she was very glad of meeting with Diana. And besides, she added that they were relatives. Juliana was sure that they would become friends. The girl opened her eyes and looked at Diana. Hope splashed in her eyes, and she uncertainly said that she hopes that they would be friends. Diana looked at her in all eyes. The girl politely said that it was a great honor for her. She did not understand that it was in the princess's gaze. The princess invited Diana to sit down at the table. She just drank tea. Diana sat down, but for a split second she felt something strange from Princess Juliana. The princess smiled again and asked if she could call Lady Resley just Diana. Diana smiled in response to her and said that, of course. Then the princess called her Diana, said that she wants to arrange a tea party. She looked at Diana, said that she wanted her to be present too. Diana agreed, saying that it was an honor for her, and the princess was delighted to say that she would just introduce her to everyone. Diana wondered why the princess was so polite with her and shows such a participation in an unfamiliar person. She looked at the princess. Now she again seemed to be an ordinary girl. After a working day in the palace, Diana returned to the estate of Resley. She sat in her room, and her maid Olga asked how her first working day in the palace passed. The servant was eager to find out the details, but Diana asked angrily what was with her, why she was doing so. But Olga wanted to know how everything went. Did the lady like the palace? Diana became sad. Olga again asked the question about how to her princess. The girl replied that she was very friendly. But she remembered her gaze and again analyzed what it was. The feeling of discomfort that she experienced at that moment. It told her something. The servant saw that Diana was not negotiating something and demanded that she tell everything. But the girl said that it doesn't matter. But so that Olga, finally behind, said that the princess invited her to a tea party. But this has the opposite effect. Olga came to even greater excitement. She wrapped her arms around her hands and said that it was incredible, and then she added that the lady was so lucky. But Diana actually did not know whether to rejoice at this event to her. In any case, she wanted to be alone as soon as possible. Therefore, she put Olga behind the door and slammed the door loudly, saying that she was tired and wants to relax. And even when she moved away from the door, she still heard the maid ask that she open the door and told her something else about the palace. But Diana did not give rest. Then the expression of the princess's face. She constantly returned to him, thinking that at that moment she did not seem. At that moment, the princess was sitting at the chess party. She picked up a horse's paw and thought about the next step. The maid turned to her, and waiting for the permission of the princess to speak, she said that Juliana called Lady Resley the wrong time of the tea party. The princess, not looking up from the game, said that it was true. She made a mistake. Juliana made a move, shot down another pawn from the board, and the maid asked me to send a person to be warned. She was very surprised when the princess strictly replied that she was not necessary but still dared to ask why. Juliana smiled slyly and said that this girl should become her close, right? So she wanted to check her. In high society, many different things are happening, and since Diana is her maid, it should be able to get out of such circumstances. Therefore, she ordered to leave everything as it is and allowed her to go. The maid was unquestioningly obeyed, but leaving through a sad look at the princess. Such behavior seemed strange to her. Her Highness has always done reasonable things. The maid first saw her like this. Julian herself, as an experienced player, making the next move, weighed all possible consequences. But here the day of tea party came. Everything was decorated with flowers and fruits. All kinds of treats were placed on the tables. The servant scurried between the tables, ending the last preparations. The princess went out into the yard to personally look at the preparations. She went to one of the florists and asked if the preparation is going well. The guy was passionate about work and did not notice Her Highness. He looked at the princess. She was magnificent. Her head was decorated with a hat protecting her from the sun. Juliana said that this is the first tea party that she suits, so there should be no mistakes. Florist bowed his head and assured her that she could not worry. They had no problems. The princess examined everything around and thought that it should be so. Today, everything should go perfectly. Of course, with the exception of one. A cunning shine appeared in her eyes. Juliana thought that it would be entertaining if the maid of the princess would be late for the first event arranged by her lady. She was wondering what her face expression would be when she arrived here. The princess will be funny to look at it. She went to her maid and said that she was glad that everything was moving without problems. The girl bowed her head to the mistress and said that, moreover, the lady sent by Her Highness helped them. Juliana started up and, looking at the servant, asked what she had in mind. What lady was we talking about? The maid bowed her head even lower, feeling a change in the mood of the mistress, and indicated where the lady sent was located. When the princess looked in the indicated direction, she immediately recognized Diana Resley. She talked sweetly with some girls. Juliana was surprised by how Diana was here. Diana felt that they were looking at her and turned to see someone could wait for her help. She noticed the princess and hurried to her, surprised that she had come. Diana began the conversation with the fact that she noticed that the weather today was just beautiful and asked if the princess agreed. The princess looked guilty at Diana and wanted to ask how she ended up here, but hesitated and looked down. But Diana smiled and helped the princess get out of this situation, saying that she had confused time and was almost late. But fortunately, this did not happen. She added that she came early to look at the palace garden. The princess got angry. It turned out that Diana came early to see the local garden. Diana thought Juliana would believe in this nonsense. She looked at Diana and she was wondering who it was. Who stood behind her? Who warned? And Diana could not hide a smile. The girl thought that the princess was probably confused since everything went not according to plan. In fact, Diana gloated from the fact that the princess thought she would fall into her trick. She was glad that she excited her cunning. She actually lived in the palace as a royal knight for more than 20 years. On the morning of the day of tea drinking, she specially gathered early, and although Olga stopped her asking why she was leaving so early, it was a long time before the tea party, but Diana said that it was her habit. She added that she would return in the evening, and the maid closed her eyes to hide the surprise that her mistress had such a habit in one day. Due to the fact that Diana was the only female knight in the palace, all the attention was focused on her. Of course, not from the good side. And over time, she learned to cope with this. We must wake up before everyone else and work even more diligent so that no one has a single reason to get to the bottom. Immediately upon arrival in the palace, she found Vanity. Diana was surprised that they are already preparing for tea party, but the maid was surprised by her question and replied that the tea party was coming soon. Diana restrainedly said that she had offered her help. Only in this way she could defeat others. She held out a plate with the princess cookie and invited her to try that the cookies are so tasty. The princess had no choice but to answer her politeness. She still frowned, and Diana smiled, thinking that the princess would need at least 20 years to defeat her. The guests began to converge soon, and Diana and Princess Julian were welcomed by the first guests. They thanked the guests for devoting time to tea drinking and invited them to go to the garden. The girls who came first were surprised. They first saw the lady standing near the princess, but one of them suggested that this is a new maid of the princess. Diana answered affably that she was glad to meet. The invited asked the question from where such a cute lady came from which family she is. Someone said that she was already so charming. I was eager to find out how it would grow up. Such attention to person Diana could not but upset the princess. Therefore, in order to attract attention and stop all the grooming of the princess, tapped a glass in a glass. There was a ringing, and the princess said that she was demanding a minute of attention. When the guests fell silent and turned in their direction, she smiled at Diana, adding that she was the daughter of Viscount Resley and she recently became her servant. This lady will be her friend. So, the princess was counting on a warm welcome. Diana smiled and again said that she was glad to meet everyone, and uttered her name. The girl sitting at the nearest table said that this was the daughter of Viscount Resley, and she added that she was glad to get acquainted. Her friend, smiling sweetly, said that Diana was still such a baby, but she already knows how to stay like that. Diana supported a secular conversation and modestly replied that she was still studying and studying. She said that she hopes for their help in the study of palace etiquette. And again, Diana was surrounded by attention. The girls noted that she was also modest to everything else. Young ladies expressed the hope that they were friends. They asked who sewed her dress, they praised his color, and the princess sat at that time. She bowed her head and quietly said that she was also surprised. The etiquette of Diana, her style and manner of speech. She's like some kind of knight. Having said this, she asked other lady, "Doesn't it seem like that?" Diana instantly turned towards her highness, so that other ladies did not have time to notice the change in her face. And the girl with short dark hair giggled and said that the jokes of her highness... Well, what is the knight from Lady Resley? But one of the lady nevertheless said that although if you look closely, there is something from the knight in it. This again forced Diana to be nervous. She tried so hard. And the girl was looking at the saying that she was so elegant, and the dress on her was perfectly sitting. The manner and tone of speech, like a real lady. She grunted and asked why such a feeling is created. But she really was confused when someone asked if she studied to own a sword. Diana hesitated with an answer, but someone came to her aid, saying that how could a lady possess a sword? There was no trace of tanning on the skin of Diana. One of the girls said that they were right. If you regularly train under the scorching sun, then the skin will quickly begin to sunbathe and rough. Diana pulled herself in her hands and smiling said that what kind of sword was there? She is busy teaching etiquette all day. The princess was pleased that she was finally able to confuse her new servant and she had to be nervous. Diana heard this laugh and got angry. The girl thought that there was a tricky little one. She began to annoy her. When it all ended and Diana Resley was driving home, she was finally able to relax. The girl exhaled and only now felt her tired. Ben, driving nearby, asked how her first tea party passed. He said that he was not worried because probably the princess took care of her. Diana strained again. And the young knight, smiling, said that he was right. The princess is very kind, right? Diana was uneasy. She asked herself what he said. Kind? The girl thought that he also needed a couple of nasty things from her in order to understand her feelings. But she had the idea that it was strange. As she remembered in the past life, the princess was not the same. She realized that Princess Juliane did not like. Diana wrapped her head with her hands. She wanted to scream, "Why? They just met. She has no reason to hate Diana." The girl thought, so it will not work if she is kicked out. She immediately remembered her father's face, his words that he knew so much. Reproaches that he barely attached her to the palace and was driven out of there. The girl suddenly clearly saw the picture that a sword was lying at her feet, and she would have to pick it up and learn the art of war. And she heard how the father said that she was a shame on the family and asks why she did not initially obey him. Watching how the sun was rolling to sunset, Diana decided that she could not sit back and wait for such a fate. The girl decided that she had to make the princess take her side. The next day, Diana woke up at dawn. She sat in a chair while the maid laid out things. Diana, addressing Olga, said that she was interested in something. And when Olga looked at her, she asked what the princess's age girls like. Olga said in surprise that Diana was her peer. The girl sighed heavily. Exactly, she forgot that they are of the same age. But the maid, continuing to fold things, said that recently there was something popular among girls. Diana immediately asked, what was it? Olga said that these were love novels. Diana was surprised, but Olga, correcting portraits on the shelf conspiratorials, replied that they were popular not only among commoners like her, but also among young aristocrats. Her words inspired Diana, and she joyfully asked Olga to go to the bookstore with her. This surprised and pleased the maid. Not every day such a walk was given. When they came to the store, the seller greeted them and politely asked that they can look for something definite. Olga smiled, and while Diana looked at shelves with many books, said that Lady wanted to find something to match herself. Diana looked at the endless shelves which were drawn to the ceiling itself, forced by books, and thought that she first sees such an accumulation of books. The seller thought for a few seconds. He aloud said that something suitable for a young lady. Diana looked at him and thought that she was living a life that had no intersection with books, and the seller invited them to go to the desired department. He took out a book from the shelf and handed it to Diana. She took the book and thought that how interesting they were. And Olga, standing nearby, smiled at thinking that apparently the popularity of novels had not yet fallen. Because some time passed, and Diana stood with a book in her hands and not moving to read the plot. She read that Rosalina looked at a middle-aged woman who was sitting in front of her. The girl vividly represented the images of the people that were written in the book. They sat in the living room. The poor girl said that she could not accept the jewelry that the woman sent her, and she, in turn, assertively asked that jewelry was not enough. She asked, "Can I buy her house?" The woman accused Rosalind of seducing her sweet son, and now she refuses to part with him. But the poor thing Rosalind, calling the woman mother, said that she did not understand her. But her appeal was outraged by an elderly woman, and she cried out so that she would not dare to call her like that. She got up and said in displeasure so that Rosalind knew her place, "How is a miserable girl like Rosalinda located next to her son?" The girl in despair said that she was pregnant from him. Diana captured the plot so much that she could not break away from reading. But when she read until the last moment, she was terribly outraged. She thought it was very interesting, and then, without restraining emotions, she called an elderly woman from the novel by Old Karga. And she added that she should be poked. Olga could not believe what she heard. She called her lady. But she did not hear her and continued to be indignant at first that the poor girl is so kind. She recommended Rosalind to throw her sword into a woman, and she continued to comment on further events. Olga became funny, and she thought that apparently the lady liked it. But soon Diana was already in the royal palace of Agrasiphanes. Princess days passed monotonously. She walked from time to time in the palace garden, and Diana accompanied her. And the rest of the time she spent her studies, reading a lot and studying different sciences. After lunch, I sat over a cup of tea. When she was resting, Diana had to make her company, and at one of these moments she put a book on the table and, pushing her to the princess, said what she had, what to give her highness. Juliana looked at the book. It was called The Precious Daughter, in Law of the Duchy. She grunted doubtfully. And then she picked up and said that it was a love novel. The author was an obsessed villain. Diana smiled and joyfully said that this morning she... But the princess did not listen and interrupted her, said that she was not reading such books. She postponed the book and said that she was the princess of this country. She does not have time to read such low-grade books, and there is no desire. Her expression was saturated with arrogance, and she said that only stupid aristocrats who have a lot of free time. She coldly said that Diana appreciated a generous gesture, but moving the book to her, she said that she would take her back. Diana smiled, restraining real emotions. She thought with annoyance that the princess could at least look at the first page. She is so interesting. She thought about the princess as a small bore, but at the same time she asked what the princess was doing in her free time. As was fitting the highest aristocracy, Juliana read books with instructions or walked, sometimes embroidered. She picked up a cup of tea and took a sip, saying that she was playing chess from time to time. Diana was surprised by such a lesson. This was an unexpected discovery, and the princess said that she knew that Diana would be surprised. Indeed, in their country, everyone has a stable opinion that chess is a male game. Juliana put a cup and added that since there is no person who could make her company in this, she often plays alone. Diana thought to herself that here it was. This was the general that could bring them closer. Diana sincerely rejoiced and said that she could make her a company in chess. There was distrust in Julian's eyes, but she immediately ordered Agatha to bring a chessboard. When they put the figures on the board, the princess said that she was saying in advance that she was not going to succumb to a newcomer. Diana smiled in response and said that the princess could not worry. She leaned over the board and stretched to the figures with her hand, said that she would begin the first, and made a move. The princess, assessing the situation, said that it was a bold move from the very beginning. And a few minutes later, from the beginning of the party, Diana took the next move and set a step and mat, and this plunged the princess into an unspeakable shock. She praised Diana, saying that she was pretty good, but the girl modestly replied that this was probably an accident. Diana dutifully said that her highness was flattering her, and then the princess suggested playing another party. And also, after some time, she sat propped up with her hand and thought intensely. She had 10 defeats in a row. She looked at Diana sitting opposite and thought that why she was so good. She what else in the womb began to study or what? Diana said she was just lucky. Although she thought to herself that the princess would never know how she learned to play chess, she smiled sweetly to the princess, saying that she succumbed to her many times, but in her soul she was quietly gloating and wanted to say that life was in practice. The princess wanted to recoup and proposed another party, but at that moment the maid came. Juliana looked at the upset servant and asked what happened. Agatha was silent for a while, and then she said that Lady Agnes came. Diana was surprised, and the princess seemed upset. And at that moment, a girl in a red dress came out from behind Agatha. She had green eyes and red hair like Diana. She smiled at the top of her mouth and joyfully said, the sister, turning to Julian. And then she added that she came. She looked inquiringly at Diana and asked that this is her sister's new friend? The girl introduced herself by calling herself Agnes Agrisiphon. Even if the daughter of the concubines still received the name of the royal family. This can mean only one thing. Her father loves her, otherwise the king. Diana leaned in curtsy and greeted Lady Agnes. She said in a simple response, "Hello." Agnes's attention again switched to Julian, and Diana looked askance at Agnes. She was outraged that she greeted her so badly. She stood aside and watched as Agnes told the princess that she had come to play, and then asked how she had been. Diana thought that they had not particularly close relations, but so it is not so. Juliana turned to Agnes and instructively said that it was okay if she was here, but in front of other guests she should adhere to the manner. She asked her to greet Lady Resley as it should. The girl made a surprised face and then asked why. Juliana began to get angry. She was annoyed by such stupid behavior of Agnes. But she patiently explained that she was afraid that she could be reproached for such behavior. Diana stood behind Agnes and smiled sweetly. She thought that they really had a bad relationship. But Agnes still, without understanding, asked what to blame. Her. Why? Fear splashed in her eyes. The maid said that Lady Agnes is no longer small, therefore should adhere to the manner, before getting rid of this to the princess. But she still asked Lady Agnes. Diana watched this whole scene and hoped that Agnes would not cry, and she hesitantly said that she was... And then again she gained a beautiful mood, and smiling, as if nothing had happened, she was always like that, and there were no problems. And she reassured Julian that it was worst. The girl still looked at the princess. She said that Juliana was too worried about her. Diana and the maid were silent. The situation was clearly glowing. Diana hoped that the princess would not turn everything here. Well, what is the baby Agnes so unconscious? But the girl, as if feeling the tension, turned around and saying that since the princess has a guest today, she will go. Wronging her hand in parting, she said that she would see her and ran away. She pushed with agility past Diana, not deigning to say goodbye. It was defiant. But Diana catched her face. She turned after the girl. Agnes grinned quite. She specially annoyed the princess. Diana quietly looked at the princess. Did she know about Agnes's true feelings? Juliana stood bowing her head and covering her eyes. She was clearly not in her irritation. Diana thought about the fact that apparently Agnes takes a position higher than Julian. Agnes was a difficult girl. From her thought, she was brought out by Juliana's shout. She asked that Lady Resley would stand so and do nothing? Diana was confused, and the princess continued to say that Agnes only looked down at her. Diana knew this, but what she could do. And then the princess blurted out that she could defend her. She told her to use her, the princess, but not to show this girl her slack. No need to succumb to its provocations. After all, Diana's reputation affects her. Diana said that she realized her highness, and to herself thought that the princess called her sister, this girl. The princess turned away and took her hand behind her head. She said that Diana could go today and she wants to relax. Lady Resley made a curtsy and said she was good. Leaving the room, she looked at the princess and thought that here it was. She thought that the princess did not like, but this, it turns out, is not so. She just broke her anger on Diana. The princess stood turning back to her and resting her hands on the table. She does what she says and indirectly. And as a helpless child, anger at an opportunity. But even so, Diana will not be able to help her. The princess went out onto the balcony and sat in a chair, leaning back and closing her eyes. Her head was cracking, and when she opened her eyes, she immediately caught the book that Diana Resley brought. She said that she forgot her book. The princess took her in her hands, but at the same time she said that she ordered her to take her. She opened the book. The princess thought that interesting in this low-grade book. Only the paper is translated. She flipped through a couple of pages and skeptically said that terrible letters skills. She was sure that the author of the low estate, who did not even stand next to the palace gates. She continued to flip through the book, continuing to find fault, where the feeling of realism. Meanwhile, a maid went to her with kettle and cups and did not know how to be. Every time Lady Agnes comes, Her Highness begins a severe headache. But Agatha was not even surprised. She went out onto the balcony and smiling said that she had prepared tea. But the princess did not answer. Agatha was surprised. She went to the table and put the instruments on the table, saying that this tea helps with a headache. She asked whether her fragrance liked Her Highness, but there was no answer again. The maid touched Juliana's shoulder and called her again. The girl looked at the maid with surprised eyes. In her hands she held the book of Diana. Agatha asked whether she would be unhealthy and said that she had brought her tea. She looked carefully at the princess. But she stared again in the book, saying that she thought that something was serious. The princess assured that she was all right and continued to read. It was evident that she was very passionate. The maid could not believe it, and again asked that the princess was really fine with the princess. But the girl, not looking up from reading, said that Agatha would leave tea and go about her business. The maid, leaving again, glanced over her shoulder. She saw how the princess reached out with her hand to the tray on which the cookies lay and stood a cup of hot tea. But the princess was so fascinated by reading that she did not look at the tray with instruments and simply rummaged through the touch in search of cookies. The maid was scalded like boiling water from the thought that if the princess will spill hot tea on herself. She rushed back. But the princess had already found cookies and took it, removing her hand from the tray. Agatha stopped and exhaled with relief. She, with fright, even took up her heart, trying to calm down his knock. And the princess continued to read The Time of Time. The next day, Diana's carriage at the appointed time stopped at the stairs of the Agriffin Palace. Ben said that they arrived and helped Diana go down to the ground. He bowed and wished her good luck. Diana walked along the corridor. She's already used to coming to the palace, and her relationship with the princess also began to improve. After the novel read, which Diana brought her, the princess asked to bring the next volume. But calm times did not last long. On this day, Agatha met her near the entrance to the princess's rooms. She said that today Diana could return to herself. The princess ordered no one to let anyone in. In the end, a problematic situation occurred. Diana asked her what happened, and Agatha replied that they had problems. His Highness King decided to bring Agnes to the palace, and since then, Princess Juliana closed in the room and ordered no one to let anyone in. Diana thought that in the end it happened, and Agatha continued, saying that at such moments the princess does not even let her in. Therefore, today, Diana can leave. But the girl said that she would go to her anyway. She opened the door, but Agatha was worried that Her Highness would be angry. Then Diana smiled and asked her not to worry. Everything will be fine. Diana entered the room and called to Julian. She heard that the princess was locked up for several days. The room was dark, and almost nothing is visible. And given the character of the princess, most likely she cannot speak out to anyone and closes in herself, drowning in thought. Perhaps she cries alone, but she is still very small and behaves like a little old woman. Diana found a lump of cotton wool on the floor. Her eyes were already a little used to the darkness, and she saw a princess sitting on the floor, and a pile of cotton wool lay near her. Diana said that she came. Juliana turned and exclaimed the name of her servants. She had sharp scissors in her hands. Diana looked at the floor in front of the princess and saw a curved thing in toys. Diana asked that all this is? Juliana rushed to rake everything and screamed that she had asked anyone not to let anyone in. She ordered Diana to leave. She continued to repeat again and again so that she left from here. But the girl did not move at her own peril and risk. Now Juliana was not at all like an elegant and graceful princess. She seemed to hear these thoughts, gathered her thoughts, and stood up to her feet and returning her voice with restraint that she had asked anyone not to let anyone into her room. She said that her order was ignored, so she was deeply annoyed. A lump of cotton wool remained on her hair. Diana continued to stand opposite the princess silently. She wanted to say that a piece of cotton sticks on the princess on her head. But then she said guiltily that it happened. The princess suddenly replaced anger to mercy and turned away, said that since Diana had already come, they would play chess. Lady Resley smiled and thought it was good. She did not think that the princess had such a character. She looked in her back and thought that she was not as bad as it turned out. At the same time, in the empire of Heberunius, the duchy of Hymen, the young master continued to deal with a sword. He suddenly crouched and did not get up. His servant Holter rushed to him asking what happened, but he only made a moan. He damaged his leg in the ankle joint, but Holter said that it was fortunately only a slight stretch. Cornelius said that he would not make a panic. He just fell. But Holter objected that he would be very overdue. He said that Cornelius would not overload himself. There was an annoyance in the blue eyes of the boy. He was silent. The Holter said that the nanny was also worried about him. He suggested that he could have a rest for today, but Kalis resolutely said that no. He gathered all his strength and got to his feet, and then he said that far even before the rest. He thought that if you compare it and her, he remembered his dreams. She cried alone at night. No one comforted her. To recognize her, she did everything, but sometimes hiding from his eyes, she cried alone. And when her hands were covered with wounds and scars, she became a real knight. He took his sword in trembling from fatigue and thought that he had no right to rest. He should not lose a minute. He looked at his faithful servant and turned to him. The guy listened to him carefully. And Cornelius Haman said that he had to make a knight out of him at all costs, and this will be his first step on her way to her. Diana and Julian competed at the chessboard. Diana thought to herself that she had never to give up, and Juliana lamented that she lost again. And at this time, Cornelius persisted in physical training. He squeezed to loss of consciousness. While Juliana and Diana walked around the palace park, he crouched with 2 full buckets of water, training his endurance. So several years have passed. Diana was sitting in her room on the estate of Resley. She was going to the imperial palace as a maid burst into her room with the news that a delegation from Hiberunia was coming. Diana got up. She was wearing a red dress that was the same scarlet color as her fiery hair. She asked Olga to prepare her a carriage, and she thought that time had come. She will go to the palace. When they arrived at the Agrafin palace, Bancroft had to make efforts to restrain the horse. He dismounted and tried to reassure him. Meanwhile, a young man and a young lady who held his hand looked at him. She looked at Bancroft, and his dexterity fascinated her, and the guy standing near her thought that who was this knight? He coped with the horse and opened the carriage door, saying that they had arrived. He was so beautiful that the girl thought that she would lose consciousness from such dazzling beauty, but the guy who stood near her also blushed to the roots of her hair. He, as a spellbound, looked at the one that came out of the carriage. It was her, Diana Resley. She leaned her hand offered by Ben and left the carriage, thanking him. There was a restrained smile on her face. Her hair was surrounded by her face with a bright halo. And now the couple who watched the girl arrived, and her knight was ready to lose her feelings together. Diana walked ahead, and Bancroft accompanied her, walking a step behind. Did she ask him how things have been moving lately? Is there progress? Ben lined up in front of Ban. His height stopped. He hesitated, but then, smiling cheerfully, asked her not to worry. He would definitely overcome this wall. This is the only way he can better protect her. Diana said that it was, but I thought that let him do this not for her but for himself. If he remained in the palace, he would already hold a high position, but he asked her to trust him. Diana smiled at him and expressed the hope that he would cope, just in case she really may need his help. He thanked her. She suddenly thought and was depressed. The fact that the Hiberunius made its move means that soon... She remembered the crazy face of Cornelius Haman and the fact that soon the war would begin, which could not be avoided. They drank tea with a princess, but Diana thought so deeply that only the 3rd time she realized that Her Highness was calling her. She started up and looked at Princess Juliana, bewildered. The princess, in turn, looked at Diana and asked what she was. And then she asked that her friend really began to meet someone. Diana was surprised by her question, and she directly asked why the princess asked him. But she asked her to look where 2 guys were sitting at the table. She drew her attention to a man in a military uniform. He seems to be sunk on her. He really looked from time to time in their direction and smiled. Diana was upset and asked the princess not to joke anymore. She wanted to add that from one of his appearance she becomes sick, but did not do this. But Juliana continued, saying that it was so for a long time watching her. He is the son of Viscount Badley. His family was incredibly rich and recently received a title. Juliana asked if Diana knows how much money he spent to take part at her party. But Diana replied that she did not really want to know about it, and she doubted that he looked at her. But at that moment she opened her eyes and looked at him, as he immediately straightened her hair and blinked to her. The princess looked away and said that she was sure of 10,000%. She added that she could no longer look at him. Diana was silent. At that moment, a conversation about the latest news went at the next table, about the fact that a delegation from Hibernia would arrive soon. The attention of the girls switched to this conversation. They discussed that the delegation that will arrive wants to conclude an alliance with their kingdom. The girls tensed. This will have to be a marriage contract, a way to create a strong connection between two royal families. Juliana is the only princess of this country, and regardless of her will, she will still be chosen as the main candidate for this role. Diana looked towards those who spoke, and her gaze was by no means kind. He enraged her. She did not understand why to talk about it now. Diana put her cup on a saucer and said that Vesti spread very quickly, and the princess replied that it was. Juliana smiled and said that the delegation was going to discuss the marriage union between countries. The young man sitting at the next table turned to the princess, but Diana looked at him with an incinerating gaze. She wanted to scream to shut up already. But he still jumped up and began to say that that empire already had a hereditary princess. The crown prince is already engaged, and the friend sitting with him also inserted the word, saying that they really want Her Highness as a second wife for the crown prince. He indignantly said that it was offensive to all their kingdom. There were indignations that this could not be allowed from all sides. Why would their state conclude an alliance with them? Someone cried out that the Riberunia is an empire of underdeveloped savages. At this moment, the princess demanded to stop this booth. She said that the empire has its own laws. Whatever decision her father made, she is ready to make and agree with him, being a princess of this country. She was ready to go to anything if it benefits their country. Someone said that they were going to conclude a peace agreement with Agrafan. And the guy, because of the next table, apologized, saying that they did not even understand that it could be so significant. Juliana said that he would continue to follow his tongue. She sat covering her eyes, and Diana, observing her, thought that the princess, although she looked calm, probably inside she was very indignant. In any case, her hand was clenched into a fist and trembled. These gates were a portal to another reality, the reality where his dream lived. And now he rushed to her meeting at a meeting. He was overwhelmed with emotions, the excitement from the fact that he again stepped on this land, the land where she lived. With him, his servant and Holter assistant was invariably with him. He incorrectly interpreted the words of his master and his delight about the earth, and said that each time he noticed this when he came here. He said that these lands were surprisingly fertile. They were very different from their Hobirunia. Therefore many tried to grab a piece of this land. Cornelius said that they needed to go. He added that they would rest at the next portal. Cornelius Hayman thought about Diana Resley, and in his thoughts he told himself that he would soon become his. And at this time, the party that the princess organized came to an end, and she thanked the guests for the fact that they came to her. Without a doubt, the guests politely answered that they had fun and thanked her back. It was the conclusion of the holiday. And when the doors of the princess exhaled the doors of the princess, it turned out to be very tiring. She was surprised where Diana. The maids replied that she went to attribute gifts to the palace. Juliana was even more surprised. Diana was in the bedroom. She stood near the table with gifts and held her hands with a leather upholstery chest. The princess opened the door and asked in surprise that Diana was here. But Diana was silent. She looked at some casket among many other gifts. The girl clearly thought. The princess was interested in what she thought so much about. She entered the room and almost closely approached her friend, but she seemed to not notice anything, even after the princess called her. Juliana carefully touched her shoulder fingers and quietly asked why she was silent. But Diana so instantly and greatly grabbed her hand that the princess did not even have time to come to her senses. She came to her senses when she was lying on the floor. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. She looked at the ceiling of the room and groaned. And only now Diana came to her senses and saw Her Highness on the floor at her feet. She looked at Juliana's floor open on the floor and asked her why she had fallen here. She said that the floor was cold. You could catch a cold. But Julina raised her hand and, pointing to Diana with a trembling voice, she said that she laid her here. The princess was indignant that how Diana dares. But then she moaned due to piercing back pain. And Diana only now realized what she had done. Horror was reflected on her face. She immediately rushed to the princess, helping her to sit down. The girl scaredly asked if everything was in order with Her Highness, and Juliana continued to moan. She grinned wryly and said that Diana seemed crazy. Does she really think that this will get away with her? The girl here sly rushed to ask for forgiveness. She sincerely repented of what happened and was annoyed that her old habits put her in such a position. The princess stood on her feet with difficulty and demanded that Diana immediately tell her what she thought about. Juliana crossed her arms over her chest, menacingly said that she should know that she grabbed such a throw over her back. Diana, with a guilty look, lowered her eyes to the floor and was silent. She had no idea how to explain everything. The princess asked her why she was silent. Does it really want to receive a punishment for disobedience and for harm to a member of the royal family? Diana said that no, just... The girl fell silent again. She did not know how to tell her this. Now the princess was angry, but she kept holding at a party so steadily repulsing all the attacks. And Diana will have to tell her that before the last portal in Hobirunia, without even letting them on the land of that country, she, Julian Agrafin, will be killed on the way. The girl fought with her. She frantically thought what could be said. After the death of the princess, the relationship between the two countries is heated to the limit. This will lead to war. In fact, Diana wanted to escape to the neighboring country before all this happens. But the plans appeared in the plans. Therefore, she did not want to contact the princess. She is still destined to die. But now she could not leave her to be destroyed. The princess was tired of Diana's silence, and she said that she did not hear her. She said that Diana clearly wants to try food for prisoners. Diana understood that one person was not able to stop the war, and even more so, she did not want to become the same doomed. She asked Her Highness to wait. She said that now she was problematic to talk about it, but soon... Diana looked at the princess and said with confidence that as soon as she finds answers to her questions, then she would tell everything. She only asked to wait. But the princess uncompromisingly stated that her passion was rejected. She indignantly asked how Diana dares to evade. Diana shook her head in frustration. And then a thought dawned on her. She folded her hands and imploringly said that she had problems at home. She just received news. Diana turned and wanted to slip away from the room, saying that she urgently needed to leave. But the princess grabbed her by the shoulder and turned to her, asked that who released her. Her face darkened with anger and looked frightening. Diana only smiled guiltily and thought to herself that everything was as she expected. Princess is a difficult opponent. And only when she was in her carriage she was able to exhale with relief. Finally, she managed to break out. I had to apply my oratory skills to sound convincing. Juliana forgave her only this time. Diana told her that she had an incredibly kind soul and left. But now, sitting in a carriage on the way home, she thought that what's the point? How can she be now? And what to do? It is unlikely that she will be able to escape by stating the princess of the whole country. The whole country will begin to pursue them. And even if they manage to hide, the war cannot be stopped. In any case, they will begin to find fault with each other, and the battles are inevitable. Diana, absorbed in her thoughts, came out of the carriage and mechanically put her hand in the hand of the knight Ben. He helped her go down and, seeing her saddened look, asked what she was thinking about. She looked at him in surprise, as if not understanding the question, and then she replied that there was simply something to think about. Bancroft continued to go near her. He said that he knew that he is not good enough for this, and I'm not sure what can be useful to her, but he said that if she share her anxiety, then they will double, and if it shares happiness, then it will increase 100 times. Ben said that he was always ready to listen to her, and he reminded that she would not forget that he was nearby. Diana's cheeks were covered with a light blush. She smiled at his touching care and thanked for his support. They continued to go throwing phrases. Diana said that she was also ready to listen to his anxiety. He smiled and replied that it would be an honor for him. And at this time, Regina spied behind them around the corner of the house. She was hateful to watch their good conversations. Envy ate her. A few days later, Diana invited Bancroft to drink tea in the garden of their estate. The knight was surprised. Why suddenly tea? Diana smiled in response to his question and said that sometimes you need to be able to relax. She wanted to say that he actually wants him to overcome that wall and jump over her. She looked at him and thought that Ben is an outstanding knight. If he had not been here, he would have long been promoted. The guy said that he wanted to say in advance that he could not enjoy a tea party. Diana took her cup and said that everything was fine. Let him just drink. The girl added that she is also not perfect. In the beginning, she did very poorly. It only now has become more experienced. He looked up at her and said with distrust that this could not be. But the girl assured him that literally a couple of years ago, she did not even know how to welcome properly. But thanks to an excellent teacher, she was able to learn everything. Every day, she trained her greeting in shoes. Ben was surprised and asked for distrust that every day. Diana nodded and added that her legs were whining in pain. The guy thought and said that, in fact, he could not even imagine. He said that she was an ideal lady from the very beginning of their acquaintance. Diana smiled and replied that everything happens for the first time. She thought the time would come and he would overcome the barrier in front of him. She thought that it would be necessary to give him a hint so that he himself would guess. The girl said that Lady Willems, her etiquette teacher, told her that the ladies should be like a flower and jewel. He listened carefully to her, and at the end he said that it sounds beautiful. Diana said that yes, but both of these objects are aimed at admiring them. Either they decorate someone or use to admire them. This is the basis of the lady. She closed her eyes and admitted to him that she did not want such a lady. Therefore, she chose the path that she herself wanted to go. Your method. He repeated her last words without understanding anything. What is she about? Diana remembered her unbearable past life. She did everything that she would be ordered. There was no herself in that life. She did not even make decisions for herself. She was only a figure on a chessboard. She said that therefore she did not want him to live such a life too, and she added that as soon as he understands this, the barrier in front of him will become insignificant. She looked at him and asked him to understand what she was talking about. The guy thought and replied that he understood, but with difficulty. It seems that she told about herself, but he saw the path that he should go. Diana smiled and said that it was possible to find similarities in their paths. She thought he would understand everything soon. The maid Olga looked at how Diana lies with the book in her hands, asked that this is the path that she chose, lie down and read novels. But Diana told her to be silent. When she got up and postponed the book, Regina entered the room. She called her sister. And covering the door, looked at the interior of Diana's room. In the end, she said that her father called her to her. Diana got up and went to the door. She silently passed by Regina without saying a single word to her. But it was evident that the girl herself wanted to talk to her. She could not stand it and grabbed Diana by the hand. Diana only looked at her out of the corner of her eye and asked, "What is?" Regina looked at her sister with a challenge, but continued to be silent. And then she asked her to listen. Apparently the girl was not easy, but she nevertheless decided and asked her question that disturbed her. Did she ask what Diana relations with Ben? Diana could not understand what kind of nonsense she carries. Therefore, she pulled out her hand and replied that they were a lady and a knight. And then she said that she answered her question. Regina looked bewildered. She said uncertainly that this was true, and I asked if Diana was sure of this. Diana got angry and said that she did not know what was happening in Regina's little head, but she asked her not to interfere. The girl rubbed her hand and thought that Regina is probably training recently. Or what? She had an iron grip. Diana turned around and said that she went in general, and she asked her, no longer asking her about this. It was offensive. But Regina flew up to her and shouted the road, overwhelming the road, that this insults Diana. Yes, this is she. Regina is offended. The girl asked why she, Diana? Diana looked at her sister and she continued to hysteria, saying that Diana and Lady Nightben and the princess's friend. Why is she everywhere, not Regina? She screamed hysterically, why? It seemed she was about to lose control and cling to Diana. A pause hung between them. Diana was at first silent and then asked what Regina wants to know why. Regina really wanted to know, but only was silent from tension. And Diana, looking at her, said that because it does not belong to her, Regina. Regina reluctantly said that, okay, but she added that she has the feeling that all this should not belong to Diana too. Diana looked at her with wide eyes. She was shocked by the words of her sister. And she asked what is strange, right? Why so? She had a feeling, as if from the moment Diana refused to pick up a sword, everything began to go differently as it should. The girl added that, although she did not care whether she became a lady or a knight, Diana stared at her sister. And she asked that Diana does not have such a feeling? She thought that Regina blames her in everything. She pushed her sister, saying that she had to leave because she had to go. Regina did not stop her anymore. Diana walked along the corridor and thought that Regina was possible and right. Everything went wrong as it should because of her. The girl never thought about it. But why? Why did she return to the past? Will anyone believe her if she tells her story? She went to the door and tapped it. From the other side, the voice of the father was heard. He asked to enter, but she could not think about it for a long time. Father said that someone was asking for her hands? For Diana, it was like a thunder among a clear sky. But the father said what to be surprised at? Princess Juliana will soon marry Diana to be her doll. She came to an end. He said that it was time for her to get married too. She did not believe her ears, asked that he was serious. What family? But the father, as if nothing had happened, said that they really liked her, the son of Viscount Badley. Diana was in despair. The same Badley? From the realization that she will have to spend all her life with such a husband, she became ill and she lost consciousness. The butler barely managed to pick her up so that she would not fall to the floor. He asked Lee, but Diana answered in a trembling voice that how he thinks. He did not hear, and she finally lost her feelings. She woke up in her room. She was in bed, and near her was a maid Olga. She carefully asked that the lady had already woken up. Diana sat in bed, and Olga said that she apparently had severe stress. To think only the lady lost consciousness right there. Although Olga added that she was not even surprised. After all, marriage is a serious test. Diana grinned bitterly and said that she did not say. But Diana was in this state not because of the news of marriage, and due to the fact that I found out who exactly the groom. The girl did not think that due to psychological shock you could lose consciousness. Olga put a spoon in her hands and said that this soup would help her digestion. She carefully said that the lady would eat him quickly until he cooled. The girl thanked her. She brought a spoon to her mouth and thought that she was so weak. Olga carefully smacked her mouth, and Diana caught herself thinking that she likes to be a lady. She realized that now she has become a true lady. At that moment, the butler burst into the room. He screamed into the whole throat, shouting her name. Olga asked, scared, what happened? Diana also looked at him, which could be shaking, and he caught his breath that the princess was urgently looking for her. And at the same time, in the palace of the kingdom of Agrafan, Cornelius Hymen thanked the king for the warm welcome. Cornelius was the ambassador of the Hoberunius Empire. The king shook his hand and said that of course they should meet them like that. He said that their states are allies, right? He added that there would be a banquet in the evening, but for now he offered to relax properly. Holder watched them and rejoiced that the young master fulfills his duties well. He was very worried when Cornelius volunteered to lead the delegation. Cornelius thanked the king again and said that they would see at dinner. The fears did not come true. He held negotiations very well, even when he first picked up a sword. Holder thought he would abandon this business in a couple of days. Cornelius looked at his servant and smiling said that they were heading into the room, and he thought and was proud that his master became a worthy knight. They walked along the corridor, and the Holter noticed that the atmosphere was good and asked how negotiations passed, but Cornelius sparingly said that there was nothing to discuss. They went outside, and Cornelius said that just like in a dream, everything went without problems, and his servant Holter added that he still could not believe, but apparently his dream was prophetic. Cornelius asked that he had only believed now. But Holter objected that how to believe in this right away. In addition, about the lady that the master often mentioned. Beautiful lady with burning red hair resembling a flame, her skin which shines in the rays of the sun. Holder made a grimace and said that he had heard about her so many times that he had already had a corn in his ears. He skeptically asked, what was she now? What does she do? Cornelius said that he did not know, and Holter again skeptically said that of course. How does the master know about it? But then he cried out, what so? Why doesn't he know where she is? Didn't he even find out about her? Cornelius reasonably remarked that if he had begun to be interested in it, he would have focused on her extra attention. And what would it lead to? He said that it is better for her if he does nothing. The Holter said, wow, and his face expressed surprise. Cornelius asked what was with his face. But Holter replied that no, nothing, just a little surprised. He asked when Cornelius learned to be so caring, but Cornelius did not understand what he was talking about. And Holter continued to say that if he knew what concern was, why did not show her in relation to him? He noticed that the master did not even imagine how hard he was. He was so used to seeing the master harmful and boring that his current words... Cornelius asked him to shut up, but Holter still said that he surprises him from a new side every time. Cornelius decided to transfer the topic into a different direction. He asked Holter if he feels a strange divine power in Agriphanes. Holder asked what he meant, that power of God, what is inside people. Cornelius's face became serious, and the Holder again asked that this is similar to the white aura that the master has since childhood. In the hands of Cornelius appeared blue and blue energy. He said that yes, but it is slightly different from the one that he possessed. Holder said that most likely in Agriphanes there is also a person who has divine force. He asked to stop telling him about all those tedious things and tell him about that lady. He asked what Cornelius said she was a knight. Is she strong? Cornelius grinned. He said, is she strong? and he himself replied that he had never seen a person stronger than her. The whole world appeals to her when she waves her sword. He closed his eyes, resurrecting her image in his memory, and said that she was strong and beautiful. And the Holter was surprised at something. He raised his hand and pointed his finger, asking that wasn't it she? He asked that she was going somewhere, right? Cornelius's eyes widened when he looked in the indicated direction. It was her, beautiful lady, with fiery hair and a delicate face. Holter looked at her in all eyes. He said that she was indeed as Cornelius described her, but he asked him to be quieter. Holter noticed that her clothes are very different from the knightly, and Cornelius thought about why she was here. Shouldn't she be engaged in the training ground at this time? And what kind of clothes on her? Diana noticed them and said that she sees that they had arrived from Hobirunia, and said that she was glad to meet. She introduced herself, saying that she was the second daughter of Viscount Resley, and her name Diana Resley was called. Cornelius could not recover. He stood and silently looked at the girl. Holter tried to pull him. It reached indecent. Cornelius wanted to ask why she was here. Did he think that she should ask her this question as naturally and at ease? But instead, he directly asked what she was doing here. Holter was horrified by such an ignorant behavior of his master. Cornelius hesitated and said that no. Diana looked at the young man with surprise, and he thought about what he did not want. Diana seemed to dawn. She remembered. I remembered him. This is Cornelius Hayman. She did not expect to meet him at all. He changed so much that she did not immediately recognize him. He was very different from Cornelius in her past life. Now he was an incredible handsome man. His silver hair was briefly trimmed, and his eyes radiated friendliness. She thought that it could be at this age that was so. She was fascinated by him. The chest became warm, and the heart began to beat more often. But the girl immediately pulled herself. She asked her heart how dare she knocking so much, and Cornelius said that he had in mind. He hesitated and could not continue again. They stood again and silently looked at each other. Diana nevertheless recalled the first. She thought that how he infuriates her. What the hell is she standing here and talking with a psychopath who banged her in a past life? She abruptly asked how she should answer the question from them. What is she doing here? Cornelius began to speak, but Holter warned him, as if asked to get together. He took her hand in his own, and asking for forgiveness, he said that he had to introduce himself. He called himself the ambassador of the delegation from Hiberunia, and called his name Cornelius Hyman. He admitted that he showed rudeness, and smiling said that he was just confused for a second. Diana looked at him and thought that here is, why would he be in confusion? This is actually, she is confused. She looked at Holter and thought that why he was here at all. Moreover, with this servant, she thought that they did not seem to show activity at this time. At that moment, the maid ran up to her. She began to shook her that she was here. She asked Diana to hurry, as her highness of the princess awaits her. Diana said that she had to leave, and she was glad to meet. Cornelius looked after her and said quietly that he was also glad. Holter said that Cornelius said that she was a knight, and she is like an ordinary lady. But Cornelius himself also did not understand what happened. Is she not a knight? He took his head with his hand and was annoyed. How would he see her now? But Holter cheated on him, saying that he had made the right choice. Cornelius did not understand what he was talking about. The servant replied that he did the right thing, that he did not dig under an ordinary lady. And then they would attract excessive attention of people to themselves and to her. Holder said that Cornelius had a lot of enemies, and the young master looked at the girl who captivated his heart. He clenched his fist and thought that the Holter is right. If she was in danger, he could not forgive himself. His heart squeezed. This should not be allowed. Diana should be safe and become it. Her gaze should only be addressed to him, and only he should hear her voice. The Holter distracted him from thoughts, asking that, by the way, he probably knows what happened to him in the future. He asked what he was there. Maybe he became the best knight of the continent? Cornelius closed his eyes and said that he did not know what was with him. He watched everything only from her point of view. And then the Holter asked about Cornelius. What was he in the future? And this simple question made the young man be horrified. He thought about his future. Dreams ceased to dream when he killed her. Judging by his crazy appearance, you can approximately guess what he was. He imagined how her dead body holds in his hands. Cornelius thought that he would have lived not letting go of her dead body. When Diana went into the chambers of the princess, she shouted that it was unimaginable. Juliana sat on the couch and cried. She said that how can they marry her for a 60-year-old man? Her voice broke, but she again asked was that the fate of all princesses, and why this happens to her. Diana also stood dumbfounded by such news. The delegation of the High Baronia introduced the content of the contract. Everyone knew that the princess would marry, but no one could imagine who exactly. She married not to the crown prince, but for the emperor himself. If the prince would have reacted normally, but for the emperor... Juliana, continuing to pour inconsolable tears, said sobbing that she sent so many letters to people from the palace. But she did not wait for an answer from them. The girl sniffed again and said that they were all so cruel. As soon as the situation turned in this way, they all turned away from her. She thought that most likely everyone went over to the side of Agnes and sobbed even more, because the princess will soon lose influence in this country. Diana went to Julian and put her hand on her shoulder, gently said what she had to write to her. The princess agreed that Diana immediately comes to her first call. But again, she said in dismay that it was a nightmare. Diana silently pondered the situation. She did not know how to console the princess, with what words it was possible to cheer her up. And at that moment, a bottle of whiskey caught her eye. The idea flashed in her head that this is what was needed at that moment. She took the bottle and put it in front of the princess, offering to drink. The princess looked at her and became quiet. And Diana thought that she, too, would not hurt to drink today. She put a glass, threw ice into it, and began to pour a burning liquid yellow. Juliana watched a stream of alcohol in her glass. She was silent. Diana poured 2 portions and asked to wait until she poured strong alcohol with water. But Juliana took her glass and drowned him in one gulp. She burned her throat and she closed her eyes with an unpleasant burning sensation. But after a few seconds she handed her glass to Diana and demanded the additives. Diana silently looked at her but did not persist. She poured another portion of the princess and offered today to just get drunk and not think about anything. She thought that everything had changed because of her. The princess marries the emperor, and Cornelius headed the delegation. After some time, Juliana was pretty fucked up. Her face was redrawn from alcohol and speech became more cheeky. The princess said that Diana knew, and then she recovered, saying that she did not know. She admitted that she actually hated Diana. Lady Resley was unpleasantly surprised and thought that the princess was already intoxicated. Diana also drank a sip from her glass, and the princess continued to pour out the soul to say that it was unlikely that Diana was guessed. She giggled. Diana remembered them with Regina and came to the conclusion that she was right. Everything has changed due to the fact that she did not follow the path of a warrior. She looked at her glass and thought that for the sake of those whose fates had changed because of her, she will have to pick up a sword. Diana looked at Julian and calmly said that she knew that the princess did not like. This surprised Julian, and she asked what was she talking about this. It seemed that she immediately sobered up. Diana thought that Juliana openly neglected her. How was it not to understand? But the princess suddenly asked if she knew why Diana did not like it. The girl replied that she did not know about this. And then Juliana said that Diana looked like that Malyavka Agnes. This statement at the same time outraged and surprised Diana. She cried out that it would be better if the princess said that she looked like a hippo than Agnes. She wanted to add that this is already too much. But the princess said that the hippo is at least sweet. Juliana thought about it. She looked out the window and remembered her parents. The princess said that she knew that there was no love between her parents, because it was a marriage by agreement. Diana realized that she was talking about the king and the queen, and the princess continued to say that she thought that they at least respect each other. But then she said that they suddenly appeared. Marquise and Agnes. Agnes was a copy of his mother. Father hugged her and smiled gently. And then Juliana realized that His Majesty could love children, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not even cause his smiles. Diana silently looked at the princess and without interrupting her confession. And she said that she thought that he would love her if she would be more kind and patient. Tears rolled again from her eyes. These were tears of resentment and self-pity. She said that how stupid she was. She took a bottle of whiskey by the neck. Diana was wary and did not know what to expect. And the princess brought her to her mouth, turned over, and began to drink right from her throat. Diana rushed to her, trying to stop her. But Juliana sharply and Roar put a bottle on the table and said that she had not finished. Diana decided to give her the opportunity to speak to the end. Therefore, she sat in place and prepared to listen. And the princess wiped her tears and asked which devil Diana is so beautiful. It was a claim. She added that Diana took herself all the attention of people. She was so angry when she saw the guests who gathered in a heap to look at her at least one eye. Diana was silent. She understood her because she was in her place. Diana spent years trying to get recognition and love, which was not destined to become her. The princess did not look at Diana. Her cheeks were burning with fire, and she said that she did not like Diana. She just hated her. But she also said that Diana was the only person who played chess with her. She put her head with her hand and continued to say that Diana brought her those strange novels, reported her. It all annoyed her, but the fact that such a person was nearby, she suddenly smiled and admitted that it warmed her, and she was sincerely grateful to Diana. This recognition was a surprise to Diana. She confusedly said, "Your Highness," but the princess still looked aside and said that it was time to say goodbye. With their game of chess, grunting Diana, and even with those strange but interesting books, she raised a bottle of alcohol again, but she was empty. The princess asked in surprise where everything had taken. Diana approached her and took her arm, and the princess confusedly said that the bottle was empty. The girl said that the princess drank a lot and she had to sleep. The princess looked into her eyes and offered to drink more. And then she rushed to her neck and again burst into tears. She asked what to do for her. The princess decided that her life had come to an end. Diana hugged her, and Julian offered to run away together. She promised that it would be good to treat her, and she asked to forgive her for everything. Diana patted her back and asked Juliana to take her somewhere away from here. Diana helped her get to the bed and laid her in bed. Lady Resley sat at the bed of the princess and watched her. Now it seemed to her that she missed her second chance of a normal life. When the next day they woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. Juliana woke up first. She groaned and then saw an inverted bottle on the table. The girl tried to sit in bed and found sleeping Diana near her. She thought that when she managed to disconnect, she began to feverishly remember yesterday evening, and it seemed to her that she told Diana that her beauty was annoying. She felt uneasy. And she also remembered that she did not want to go to the Empire. Showed her weakness. Then she remembered that she said that Diana warmed her. She, completely annoyed, thought that how could such words say? At that moment, Diana moved. The princess immediately lay down and pretended to be sleeping, and Diana, on the contrary, got up and took up her head. Apparently yesterday's alcohol made itself felt. She looked at the princess and asked Her Highness how she feels. But Juliana stubbornly pretended to be sleeping, and she herself thought that what a shame. She was ashamed to look Diana in the eyes. Diana continued to look at her and said that she knew that she was not sleeping. Then the princess sat in bed and reached out, saying that what a wonderful morning. And then she grabbed her head and admitted that her head hurts prohibitively. Diana got out of bed and asked to wait. She would bring warm water with honey. But before she had time to take a step, something pulled her at the skirt from behind. She turned and saw how the princess was holding her, accusing Diana, who wanted to run away. But the girl asked what was with the princess. Did she not sobering up yet? Juliana looked away and assured that she was sober. And what is Diana about? What happened yesterday? Diana grinned and said that she would go, but the princess again could not understand what she was talking about. And then Diana said that if she was scared to go alone, then she would go with her. In the Empire of Hiberunia. Juliana looked at her in all eyes with hope and distrust. And Diana, smiling, said that this was her answer to yesterday's sincere confessions of the princess. She added encouragingly that people tend to adapt and get used to new conditions, right? She went out into the corridor and asked Agatha to bring water with honey and a cure for a hangover. The maid asked in surprise that Her Highness had drunk, but then she grinned and promised that she would bring everything soon. Diana went outside, there pouring heavy rain. She put her hands under the jet and thought that it was even better. She decided to teach Viscount how to teach and put it in place and then leave this country. She constantly put off, but it was time to leave here. But before, she was distracted from her thoughts because someone stood nearby and she looked out of the corner of her eye who it was. At first, her gaze hooked on her silver hair, and then she saw the profile of his face. He also stood and looked at the downpour in front of him. It was Cornelius Hayman. Diana thought about what he was doing there. It seemed suspicious to her. And at that moment, he turned his head in her direction. There was a surprise in the gaze of crystal blue eyes, but this lasted only a moment. He smiled at her, and naming her by name said that they had met again, and he added that it was on the street of pouring rain,